respond to a request to be promoted, we will note your absence and move on to the next speaker and try again later in the meeting. Each speaker will be given a maximum of 2 minutes for their remarks. The 2-minute limit will be strictly enforced and shorter comments will be very much appreciated. For all speakers who signed up in advance, please ensure that your Zoom name matches the name you used to sign up. If your displayed Zoom participant name does not match your sign-up name, your name may be called, but if we can't identify you, we cannot
Recording in
promote you to speak.
progress.
So again, please verify that your Zoom participant name matches your sign-up name. All speakers will get a 30-second verbal warning before their time expires and will be muted at the expiration of their time. Finally, we thank everyone for being here and sharing perspectives with us. This budget hearing is an important opportunity for members of the public to address the school committee and for the committee members to directly hear your thoughts and your concerns on the proposed budget. Although we do not respond in this context, we will listen and seriously consider your feedback, which will help to inform our decisions regarding approval of the FY24 budget. As a reminder, each of us is also available by email or phone should anyone wish to schedule a conversation. Now, let's begin. First up on our speaker list, we have Lucy Howard Karp. Lucy, please state your name and address.
Hi, sorry about that. I just wanted to make sure I was unmuted. My name is Lucy Howard Karp. I am a student at Newton North High School. I live in Dedham, Massachusetts. And I just wanted to make the comment that understanding our differences has a huge impact on me. I've been a presenter and I had gained so much satisfaction being able to share my story with the students and to really express who I am and my identity. I think it's so critical that we educate young kids. And it makes me feel like I am a person. I want people to understand me, to see my potential. And my identity is evidenced by informing other students about that. And they're learning something really important. It's also very impactful for students to learn and hear. Understanding our differences is critical to the continuity of making sure that our global presence is better for all students and for our future. Thank you very much. I'm finished.
Thank you, Lucy. Up next, we have a, okay. Up next, we have Jesse Champion.
Hi, good evening, students in special education. The school committee just recently recommitted to the values of inclusion set forward in our mission statement. I understand that budgetary constraints are challenging, and also that with each cut or trade-off, we send a message about our values based on what we choose to do with our funding. Many people have spoken about the UOD program. It set our district on a path as an innovator in educational disability inclusion so many years ago. We still share the same end goal now as we did then, and we still have a long way to go. There are significant disparities in academic performance and more fundamentally in how happy and connected kids feel at school between students with disabilities compared to their non-disabled peers. This disparity is not simply addressed with one-off learning. There is no default, normal, right, or more perfect kind of human. To build meaningfully inclusive schools, we need to embed that principle into the core of every classroom on an ongoing basis, and we need to provide educators with the resources to make that possible. Our values are committed to inclusion, so I ask that NPS maintain funding for disability inclusion efforts in a way that makes sense to pedagogy and current knowledge and understanding. That our district move towards not pity or awareness or acceptance, but to genuine appreciation of those with disabilities and commit to becoming actively anti-ableist. That we consult with members of the disability community regarding how MPS can more fully embrace universal design and create more accessible, inclusive, and affirming spaces for everyone. Please encourage funding for programming and development that allows my children to be true valued members of this community and allows this community to be a true representation of the values we want our children to carry into the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jessie. Up next, we have Martha Bixby.
Hi, my name is Martha Bixby, and I live at 51 Hyde Street, Newton Highlands. I have a kindergartner and a third grader at Mason Rice. In putting together this budget, NPS has chosen 7 classrooms to go to 27 students or higher. Yet the administration has proudly stated that the class size average will be 21.3 students for grades 3 to 5. That means the educational experience of 190 students will be wildly different than the other 4,800 NPS elementary students next year. My now third grader is scheduled to be in one of those classes of 28. He was in kindergarten when everything shut down in March of 2020, and his classmates' educational career has been significantly disrupted ever since. These children missed most of the second half of kindergarten, had a hybrid or completely virtual first grade, which at least in my house didn't go so great. And second grade, while a more normal year, was largely behind masks and infused with anxiety about germs and time out of school for exposures or illnesses. Now in third grade, these kids have shown and felt the impact of their missing years of social emotional development. There have been significant behavior issues, and the group overall has needed additional interventions at school and in the after-school program. And yet next year, they were chosen as one of 3 grades throughout Newton's elementary schools to receive less adult supervision and support. Members of the school committee, tonight I ask you, please be proactive, please be creative, and please do not put the brunt of these budget cuts on the back of these 190 students. Thank you.
Sure, thanks, Steve. So up next, we have a group of students, and as I call their names, that'll give you some time to promote them and get them ready to speak. We have Rihanna Nair, Cordelia Song, Anaya Haraprasad, Cordelia Song, Rihanna. Oh, I'm sorry. Are these repeating? They are. Is that, and then Caleb Casey, I think, is the last. Okay.
From our hearts and minds, we need you to hear and care. Student haikus speak.
Invest in Newton's Future by KB. Every 3 years, please see Newton families' needs, fund all our futures. Vice Principals by Cordelia Song. Helps principals work. Our schools need vice principals. They connect with all.
Overcrowding by Orange Schwartz. Class.
Not a Welcoming Place. Save the ESPs by Jolene Wong. A first day in school, my teachers can't fully help. Who is there for me?
We embrace drama. Theatrical arts are key. We need expression.
When I search for books, they're always there to assist. Keep the experts there. Librarians by Rihanna Nair.
Important teachers being sacked. Cause budget cuts. Vote to find the funds.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rihanna Cordelia, and Caleb. I think I got all three. Thank you very much. Up next, we have, where shall we go, Stephen? Anthony Dighton.
Yes, thank you. So I'm Anthony Dayton at 138 Lake Avenue. I have two kids currently in the Newton Public Schools and a high schooler who went through the school system. First, I would say thank you to the school committee. I know everyone in this room is very much committed to excellence in the Newton Public School system. This community of children have had their foundational educational experience interrupted and disrupted by the pandemic. They've been asked by this community, by Newton, by the state of Massachusetts, to leave behind their beloved school, their classroom for over a year, and they've sat alone behind screens, and they're asked to interact with their friends and teachers virtually. And the impact has clearly been very profound. They're behind socially, and they're behind academically. We hear this from their principals, from their educators, and we even hear it from the kids themselves. And what they need now is intensive interaction with world-class professionals who are their Newton Public School teachers. The most important intervention that's going to close the social, emotional, and educational gap that these children face is one-to-one interaction with their teacher. The ratio of kids to teachers is the key metric for improving educational, social, and emotional outcomes. So my simple message is this: don't close this budget gap by dramatically increasing classroom size. Class size is the foundation for the educational experience, especially this class and these kids. They've missed so much, and putting them in a classroom with 28 kids is going to put them further behind. Our community's kids responded by interrupting their educational experience when the community needed them to. And now I would ask the community to respond by supporting them, by not cutting staffing and dramatically increasing classroom sizes. So thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Up next, we have, is Patrick Song one of, okay, Patrick Song.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak to the school committee. I want to point out that the mayor is responsible for funding this gap because the override failed because of lack of trust from the Newton voters for her and the school committee. And do not blame the economy because the debt exclusions for those two schools did pass. People are willing to support the schools. We have the money, there's free cash, we need to fund it. I understand that we have a structural deficit, and I don't want to make it clear, it's not because of the teacher contract. All that last contract did was get the teachers to the average of our peers, but we still have the structural deficit that needs to be funded. As an operating finance professional, I get the need for matching one-time use and one-time funds and continuing funds and continuing uses. I would contend that these are one-time uses because we will still need to get an override done when we get a new mayor, and we should use these funds now so to limit the short-term damage to these children. I've urged that the school committee adopt Chris Breshke's proposal and use those funds to cover the operating needs for class sizes, kindergarten aides, and the elementary strings orchestra program, and understanding our differences. It's better to go for a debt exclusion for Horace Mann, which is the voters will support that. We know that from the last vote, and then use these other funds to fund the gap on the operating basis. I'm confident we can get that override done. So let's use these funds, use the free cash and whatever we can free up from Chris Breshke's proposal to limit the damage to our children in the short term. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Up next, we have Bangzing Han, and I apologize if I've mispronounced. Oh, he did. All right. I see left Erica. Okay.
Hello. Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. Hi, my name is Fang Xing Hong. I live in 59 Rowena Road. I have a third grader at Mason Rice. At our latest teacher parent conference last week, I was pretty shocked to hear some comments from the classroom teachers on this cohort of students in her classroom. So those kids, this cohort of kids sometimes could be very competitive and some aggressive. They could be mean to each other. They don't know how to appropriately care for their and others' feelings. So the teacher in the classroom often have to attend to even just classroom conversations. You can hear a conversation like, "Oh, I have a watch. Look at it. This so what? It's not a small watch." Or you can hear his comment, "What fun it is again without winning." So we hear similar comments from the Mason Rice after school teachers. I even received a formal letter to all from after school directors on this the social emotional development of this cohort page students. I also have an 8th grader, have gone through the path before. I did not recall this many social emotional issues when my older one was in 3rd grade. Of course, now, right, the 8th grader has his own issues with being a rebellious teenagers. I do not know how much that was affected by the pandemic. However, I do can see the current 3rd grader cohort is very different. The first 2 years in elementary school was significantly disrupted by the pandemic. Instead of interact with their peers and the teachers, they started to interact with computers and play games. They do not really learn how to appropriate interact with the peers, with teachers. They need a much more attended guidance in the classroom settings and in daily lives. So I can imagine next year's if the classroom is
So much.
okay.
Thank you, Fang Xing. Up next, we have Lin Chang.
Yes. Hi, everybody. My name is Lin Chang. I'm at 391 Waverly Avenue. I'm currently professor of violin at the Boston Conservatory. I grew up in Newton and attended Newton Public Schools, as did both of my children. In my career, I've had the honor of performing at the Nobel Peace Prize ceremony for President Obama at the Kennedy Center. None of this would be possible had I not heard the first sounds of the violin at Cabot School from a visiting musician. I was still at Cabot at age 10 when I made my debut with Arthur Fiedler and the Boston Pops. The importance of an early music education is crucial to a child's development. My wife, a pediatrician, cites numerous studies which show how playing an instrument at an early age enhances brain plasticity. The fine motor skills which develop aid problem solving and transfer to other disciplines. And now I would like to read a statement from my colleague and friend, Yo-Yo Ma. Music has always been for me a search for truth, beauty, and harmony. At its core, making music disciplines our imagination, inspires curiosity, and connects us to one another. It creates meaning, locates memory, increases our emotional quotient. In a world where there are so many fractures, many of them caused by massive empathy deficit, it pains me to learn that one of the most enlightened educational districts in the country is even thinking of canceling its string program. I hope that what I heard is but a false rumor and that the school board would fully fund its string program next year and every year. Our students deserve the best chance to learn the skills on how to cope with difficult scenarios, practice active listening, work in teams, bring out the best in others, and help find meaning and happiness in life. Music does all of that. I know you will do the best for their future. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Up next, we have Lefterica Russell.
Yes, hi, my name is Lefterica Russell. I live at 123 Norwood Avenue. And I want to talk about my son. He participated in the orchestra playing cello in 5th grade at Cabot. Orchestra was also an option in 4th grade, but only remotely. And he was very much a beginner. And despite the teacher's effort, it just wasn't working for him. So at the beginning of the 5th grade, when he finally joined, he was very much a beginner. He also had some challenges. So before joining the orchestra, I contacted the orchestra teacher describing him and his lack of practice, but being very interested in playing. Mr. Shepard, the orchestra teacher, ran with that. He stayed with him for an additional 15 minutes after each rehearsal, working on his skills, being very supportive, nurturing, and instilling the love of playing an instrument and playing in the orchestra. My son was gaining confidence, and as he was able to play a simple song at the beginning and later able to learn the music piece they were practicing for the year-end concert. At the end of the year, the orchestra performed 3 times, and they sounded good. My son played along with the rest of the players, being the most confident I've ever seen him. He looked proud of himself and being part of the orchestra. In elementary school, the orchestra doesn't provide the instruments. It boils down to having one orchestra teacher working with a group of kids once a week. Is that such an expense worth cutting, considering the impact it has? I feel that every child deserves the opportunity to experience playing in an orchestra, to be part of a group that in this case makes music that enriches people's life, to hear how the sound of his instrument blends with the sound of every other instrument into this beautiful piece of music that makes people stop and even for a moment get taken away from the everyday worries.
Next, we have Alex Pascal. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Alex Pascal. I live in Newton Highlands at 34 Floral Street, and I'm the father of a 3rd grader and a kindergartner at Mason Rice. I'm also a proud NPS alum. Thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight, and thanks for what you're doing to address the NPS budget shortfall. I know these challenges are difficult, and I appreciate your service. Like thousands of other Newton parents and residents, I'm deeply concerned by the budget cuts, and particularly the inequitable impact of the budget cuts on certain schools, teachers, and students. While some of the prospective cuts would result in the elimination of NPS-wide programs and resources, which is devastating in and of itself, as we've heard, other cuts disproportionately affect a small minority of elementary students. The classroom experience is the heart and the foundation of the elementary school system and education. Whereas the vast majority of elementary school students in Newton would experience no change in their classroom sizes and experience, the classrooms for a few students will experience, for a few grades in a couple of schools, including Mason Rice, where my kids go, will increase to 27, 28, or even more kids. That's an increase of 50%. Even if the average elementary classroom increases to only 21.3 students, individual students and grade levels do not live in the averages. With all due respect to Newton's outstanding educators, the kids in those quote unquote consolidated grades with high class sizes will have a dramatically different, and I fear highly inferior, education than their peers across Newton. That's profoundly unfair to those students and their teachers, and frankly, it's deeply inequitable as a matter of principle. If classroom sizes were increasing significantly across the board for all Newton elementary students due to budget cuts, it would be tragic and frustrating, but also understandable. But as currently envisioned, the budget cuts in Newton fall highly disproportionately on a distinct minority of Newton's elementary students. That flies in the face of NPS's system-wide goal for educational equity, a goal to which I very much hope and expect NPS remains committed. So here's what I'm asking. First and foremost, please do everything in your power to find the resources to make up the entire NPS budget shortfall so that no student sees an adverse change in their experience and opportunities next year.
Your time is
Second,
up.
if that's not possible, please
Thank you,
cut equitably
Next,
so that
we
all students and
have
educators
Nat
feel.
Penn. Nat Penn. Thank you, Alex.
Hello, my name is Nat Penn. I'm at 6 Willard Street. I'm a senior at Newton North who participated in the strings program at Underwood Elementary, and I'm going to tell you about how the elementary strings program changed my life. I moved to Newton right before starting 3rd grade, and I'd been playing violin before that. Neither of my parents were able to secure a teaching job in the first year we lived here, and one of them was not able to secure a job at all for a while, so we were really struggling financially. And while I was able to obtain a scholarship to take private lessons, my family could not afford for me to participate in orchestra outside of school. And I know that pretty much any musician can agree that playing music with other people is extremely helpful to their musical improvement and is also a lot of fun. And through the NPS strings program, I was able to play in the orchestra, and now I am so much better as a musician and as a person because of that. And I'm still very involved in the music programs at Newton North, and I was at Bigelow. And I've also gained a lot of very close friendships through this orchestra program. So I am urging you to not cut that elementary strings program, because without it, I would not have been able to have any of these formative musical and social experiences that have helped me through life. I'm disappointed that Newton, a city who boasts its quality public education, especially its award-winning arts programs, is even considering it an option to cut such a crucial program. I'm aware that the override didn't pass. However, the people who will be affected by this cut are not the affluent or childless families, but children themselves who cannot impact what happens to their own arts programs, and economically disadvantaged families whose children would not be able to learn a string instrument without these programs. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Nat. Up next, we have Brooke Brindley.
Hi there, I'm Brooke Brindley at 73 Spires Road here in Newton. I'm a mom of a current second and fourth graders at Memorial Spalding and a former PTO president. First, I want to thank the committee for taking the time to hear from the community this evening and for all you do for our schools. I'm here tonight to talk about my disappointment in the funding shortfalls for the Newton Public School System and how it will personally affect our family and the community at large. I don't love public speaking, but I'm here tonight speaking on behalf of those who do not have a say, but are going to be affected the most, and that is our children. I strongly feel that defunding public education is very short-sighted. Great public education is a foundational identity of Newton. Like so many others on the call tonight, we moved to Newton for its schools. The public school system does not only affect families with school-age children, but affects property values, businesses, and the overall prosperity of Newton, of the city. The lack of support for education from the city will have immediate and long-term effects. For us personally, it means that my daughter, a current second grader, going to third grade, will go from having 17 students in her classroom to over 25. After the lasting negative impacts our kids have had by starting kindergarten during COVID, it is not right that they should be put into classes this large. Given this is the second year in a row that we as parents have had to fight for our proper funding for our schools, I'm concerned that the town has lost touch and is undervaluing the critical importance of school quality to Newton's very own identity. A quality, fully funded school system is a necessity. It is not an item to be put up for discussion. The budget needs to have the ability to adjust to the changing needs of the schools. Any line item from the budget could have been placed on the ballot for the override. I don't envy the difficult choices that have to be made to balance a budget that suits the needs of the entire city, but schools should always be the top priority. We are a town made up of loads of very smart people, and so many that care very deeply about this issue, especially those who are sharing our opinions with tonight. And I know that together this is a solvable problem. Therefore, I implore that the NPS budget is fully funded in order for our children to not have to suffer the effects of the proposed budget.
Thank you, Brooke.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Jenny.
Oh, thank you very much. My name is Jenny Acosta, and I live at 11 Walnut Hill Road in Newton. I want to thank you to the school committee members and Superintendent Smith for the opportunity to share a few thoughts about understanding our differences this evening. I'm a Newton resident, proud parent of 2 Newton South High School alumna, and the Director of Curriculum Growth and Technology for Understanding Our Differences, or UOD. I had remarks prepared tonight, but instead I want to read some remarks prepared by one of our very long-time speakers, Brian Heffernan, who's on his way to speak to legislators with other young adults from the Massachusetts Down Syndrome Congress. He's on his way to Washington and he can't get online. This is his statement. Good evening, my name is Brian Heffernan and I am a graduate of Franklin Elementary School, Day Middle School, and Newton North High School. I was fully included throughout my education. Franklin was great. All the students knew me and my family, and I had a lot of play dates and went to many birthday parties. Day Middle School was a bit trickier because the students came from a number of elementary schools and many of them did not know me. That was the first time I got teased. What I want to tell you is that every time I was bullied, it was my Franklin school friends who stood up for me, stopped the bullying, and went to get the teacher. They had learned about being allies from the Understanding Our Differences program. I am 32 years old now, and I work at the State House, Star Market, Auburndale, and as a guest speaker at conferences and in college classrooms. I've also been a guest speaker for Understanding Our Differences for about 15 years now, and I have spoken at every elementary school in Newton many times. The students enjoy hearing my story, and I love answering their questions. I also like bumping into them in the community because a number of them recognize me, and I like being an example for younger kids with disabilities. The other day, a second grader with Down syndrome came to hear me speak, and it meant a lot to him and his mother. Understanding Our Differences has made a huge difference in my life and in the lives of all Newton students. Please keep the program and keep funding it. And I ask for that too. It's our goal to amplify the voices of people with disabilities and let the students in Newton get to know the speakers for who they are and what they can share with them. Thank you very much.
Sorry about that. Up next, we have Rebecca Lubens.
Good evening, Chair Olszewski, school committee members, Superintendent Smith, and Mayor Fuller. I'm Rebecca Lubens, Executive Director of Understanding Our Differences. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak tonight. As you've heard from our many passionate supporters, we're strongly urging that UOD be preserved both in the budget and in its long-term partnership with the Newton Public Schools. Perhaps the strong outcry about keeping UOD and NPS may have surprised some, but you, the school committee, know UOD and its track record of adapting to the requests and needs of NPS. We know a few have raised concerns about some aspects of the program, but we expect and even embrace questions as understanding about disability is always evolving. But beyond the details of what we offer, it's important to understand that UOD is more than just a curriculum. We're not like a textbook published by a business that can be adopted and then easily discarded when learning preferences change. There is a living, breathing organization behind our lessons that is deeply invested in the values of respect and inclusion and is deeply rooted throughout the Newton community. This organization has touched and involved thousands of students and parents, teachers and principals, and especially people with disabilities whose voices have been empowered and included in every single presentation we've given for the past 45 years. UOD is enmeshed in the way the city of Newton sees itself as a model community that embraces and values and honors differences. People with disabilities who live here believe UOD makes this a community that is comfortable and welcoming, and people without disabilities believe that UOD makes schools and community life better for everyone. I ask you please to vote for a budget that includes UOD as the change-making agent it must continue to be. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rebecca. Up next, we have Jackie Lee Donabed.
Hi, I'm Jackie Lee Donabed. Thanks for having me. I'm at 982 Beacon. And I'm speaking, my husband and I are the parents of a third grader and kindergartner at Mason Rice. And I'm speaking today just on, based on our experience. We're worried about the bigger class sizes. So according to the proposed budget, we'll cram all the third graders from 3 classes into 2 classes next year. And as some of the other parents you've heard from Mason Rice, we're worried because, you know, these kids in particular have kind of had a rough go. You know, we've all suffered through COVID, but this particular class, they only had half a year of kindergarten, and this is their first, you know, kind of normal year back. And so, and it's been apparent that they're struggling both academically and socially and emotionally. And we're kind of worried that, you know, having less attention versus with the distracted teacher with 28, you know, kids in a class is not going to help, and it's going to just set them back even further. So that's what I'm concerned about with Mason Rice. But honestly, I don't want any of these kids' classes to get cut, or all the fun or all the programs that are being affected. So I know it's really tough and we're short with the money, but I'd love to just find a way to find it somewhere else and not let these kids pay the price. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Up next, we have Mayasem Ali.
Oops. Hello, hi, good evening. My name is May Samhali. I live at 84 Hancock Ave in Newton Center. I'm the mother of a 3rd grader at Mason Rice and a 7th grader at Brown. And I'm very concerned about the effects of all of these proposed cuts. For all of these wonderful programs, including Understanding Our Differences, but I'm particularly concerned about the class sizes. As you know, several of our previous speakers have noted, the current 3rd grade class at Mason Rice is one that has really suffered quite a lot as a result of COVID. And so they're behind where we would think they should be socially. And putting them in a huge classroom with 28 kids is, I think, going to be very disruptive to their development. And moreover, it's completely inequitable when compared to the other 4th grade classrooms in Newton. And so that's something that I know the schools have really stressed equity across schools for many reasons. And I think that's important that we maintain it, particularly for something as fundamental as classroom sizes. I know that most of the people so far have spoken about elementary schoolers, which is very, very important to me, but also the middle school cuts are very important to me as well. Principal Lice sent an email today saying that they're expecting most class sizes to increase to up to 28 kids, and that she's expecting significant disruptions of their teams, including moving teachers into areas where they have less experience and expertise. And just like our elementary schoolers are at a sensitive stage, the middle schoolers are too. And this is really a place where they're learning social skills, they're learning how to be young adults. And jamming them into large classrooms is going to be terrible for their education as well. Moreover, I'm worried that if we drop our standards, that it'll be very hard to recover. It's kind of a one-way street.
Thank you, Marissa. Up next, we have Ima Johns Jotier.
Hi, I can't, for some reason, my video is not starting, but that's fine. Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please begin.
Okay. My name is Ima Johnsdotter. I live on 156 Warren Street in Newton Center. I'm talking to you today as a mother of a 14-year-old with a disability who attends 8th grade at Brown Middle School, as an advocate for equity, inclusion, and accessibility in Newton, and as a parent volunteer and coordinator for Understanding Our Differences. I'm here to ask you to keep Understanding Our Differences in the NPS budget. My son had an opportunity to be the featured speaker for UOD's Physical Disabilities Unit for 2 years in a row. There, he got to share his disability with 5th graders and answer questions from curious peers, anything from what's the best part about having a disability to my sister says she knows you. And the impact was immediate. His peers learned that my son has to do some things differently, that it's normal for him to do things differently, and that he just wants to have fun and be included like everybody else. The very next day, my son was invited by the 5th graders to participate in a game of football during recess. They had realized that all they had to do was ask, and they figured out together how to include him for the rest of the year. Not only did my son's social and emotional health benefit enormously, but an entire class of 5th graders had started to learn that including someone in a wheelchair is not that hard and that being different is normal. This attitude of inclusion that supported my son and his peers didn't just happen overnight in Newton. Parents, advocates, and Understanding Our Differences have worked tirelessly for decades to change the lives of students with disabilities in our community. I want people to understand that we cannot take this atmosphere for granted, because we hear about ableist attitudes in other cities and towns in Massachusetts that normalize the exclusion of our young disabled friends. Please don't let that happen in Newton. Please keep Understanding Our Differences in the NPS budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Ima. Up next, we have Emily St. Martin.
Good evening. My name is Emily St. Martin, and I live at 143 Homer Street. I'm the mom to a kindergartner and a 3rd grader. I'm a lifelong Newton resident, NPS alum, and I did a short employment stint in NPS. I believe in the Newton schools, especially our educators. I've been in a funk since this budget proposal was brought forward, wondering how it's possible the district is failing our children this way. We're a city of resources with some of the best schools around. We're at a breaking point that's been a long time coming, and the blame can't go simply to one place. But I'm interested in solutions and how we can lessen these very real cuts threatening our schools, our children, and our families. I'm proud to live in a ward that supported the override. We understood the impact to our kids in schools if it didn't pass. Yet my daughter is now slated to be in one of the 3 classrooms next year with 28 students. 28. That's a 50% increase in class size and is simply unacceptable. When I worked for MPS, I was a halftime aide in a class with 28 second graders. So I understand the impact of this firsthand. And class sizes this large don't work, even when they are led by skilled educators. My youngest daughter is completing her kindergarten year, and we've heard repeatedly from the beginning of the year how integral those K aides are. This is the first typical year of uninterrupted full-day kindergarten. How can we cut these aides with such a small sampling of data? My daughter has certainly seen the benefit. I'm incredibly concerned the message of these cuts is to continue to ask our educators to do more with less. We're going to start losing a foundation of our system if we undervalue a large part of our core. I implore the committee to consider any possible funding options to increase our bottom line and put in no uncertain terms, save our schools and provide our children with the resources to give them the education they deserve.
Thank you, Emily. Up next, we have Brenda Noel. Brenda, you're muted.
For goodness sakes, you think I would know. I come to you tonight as the Executive Director of Pathway to Possible, an organization in Newton that serves 32 individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. We have 5 houses in Newton. Last night, our board of directors met, and I'd like to share a letter with you that they have drafted. The board of directors of Pathway to Possible was dismayed to learn that understanding our differences has been stricken from the 23-24 NPS budget. Our organization provides residential care and support services to 32 adults with cognitive and developmental disabilities across 5 homes in Newton. And our board is comprised of parents and siblings of individuals with disabilities, special education teachers, public advocates, and Newton residents committed to strengthening our city. Carol Beard and Mary Margaret Pappas, 2 of UOD's founding members, were instrumental in our own organizational years, then in the beginning known as NWW Committee for Community Living. P2P's core values are independence, community, advocacy, and meaningful relationships. These are values that we share with UOD, and we're proud to exist and thrive in a community as inclusive and as accepting as Newton. And we're committed to ensuring that our current and future clients are able to safely and happily live, work, and play in Newton for generations to come. Since 1975, children with disabilities have been guaranteed equal access to public education, and studies have repeatedly shown that a reduction in stigmas and exclusion by peers yield better educational outcomes for individuals with developmental disabilities. UOD's work is grounded in disability awareness that will lessen these stigmas and exclusions for the specific population that my organization serves. The impact it has on children inevitably expands beyond that goal to teach and promote compassion, empathy, and patience for their peers and all community members. I'm going to skip to the important parts. I want to be clear, no program is perfect. Our own organization came to be because of the evolution of policy and public thought, and we're constantly improving our programs to be at the forefront of the best practice and service provision.
Thank you, Brenda. Up next, we have Michael Grubb.
Hi, my name is Michael Grubb. I live at 12 Elm Court in West Newton. I'm here with my daughter, Tallene, a 7th grader in FA Day Middle School. I'm also a father of a Burr Elementary 5th grader. I urge you to keep funding Understanding Our Differences and keep its programs in our elementary schools. The Understanding Our Differences program was invaluable for making my daughter, who has a visual impairment, feel welcome at Burr Elementary. My favorite part of volunteering in the program was hearing the guest speakers, like Evan Brunel, a former baseball journalist for CBS who is deaf. The students quickly saw past his disability and started peppering him with baseball questions, like they would have any baseball expert. Like Yuna Jada, a recent Harvard graduate with a visual impairment who inspired my daughter. Like David Clark, a Newton parent who uses a wheelchair who got to connect with all the kids in his son's school. These guest speakers are powerful at normalizing disabilities, at teaching kids not to be afraid or embarrassed to talk to someone with a disability, and they leave lasting impressions. Parent volunteers are also a gem in the program. Raising children is a community endeavor, and each parent who volunteered while my daughter was at Burr was another community member, perhaps someone who would host my daughter for a play date or a chaperone for her field trip that learned about disabilities. I myself learned a lot about while volunteering. The Physical Disabilities Unit taught me about universal design, and an activity called Seeing the Barrier changed how I think about accessibility. This helped me be a better father to my daughter and a more effective advocate for her. I hear that some parents do not like the Understanding Our Differences approach to neurodiversity. That is a reason to improve or supplement that unit, but not a reason to drop the whole program. I hope the superintendent will form a working group to hear feedback and recommend improvements. In sum, Understanding Our Differences is critical to making our schools and our community an inclusive place. Keep the program in our schools and keep it funded.
Thank you, Michael. Is Talene wanting to speak separately?
Yes.
All right, up next we have Talene Grubb.
Hi, my name is Talene. I live at 12 Elm Court in West Newton. I am a 7th grader in FA Middle School and I have a visual impairment. I'm here to tell you why you should vote to keep Understanding Our Differences. Because I am visually impaired, I have been directly impacted by the benefits of understanding our differences. One lesson I remember vividly was when Una Jada came to speak to our class. Una is a Harvard graduate who is visually impaired. I remember that it was really validating to hear that someone else had faced similar challenges. After she had finished talking, I spoke to her briefly about the difficulties we faced. I thought that it was really nice to talk to someone who understood my frustrations and disadvantages. Another memory I have is when everyone learned about Braille and wrote their name in it. I finished within seconds and had a lot of fun helping everyone else. Instead of being seen as a kid who read like an alien, I was seen as a kid who was literate in a second language. Another thing that is great about Understanding Our Differences is that it lowers the amount of raised eyebrows and questions asked about my vision. Most of their questions get answered in the program. This means that they don't ask me. Answering questions can get frustrating because people ask the same questions over and over and over and over again, which, as I'm sure you could imagine, could get on pretty much everyone's nerves. This way, everyone receives the same answers at the same time. Understanding our differences is very beneficial to the kids in our community with disabilities. It helps them feel included and shows the other kids that we are all human. Please continue to make Understanding Our Differences a priority by funding it next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Talene. Up next, we have Molly Doris Pierce.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Molly Doris Pierce. I'm at 553 Watertown Street. I am a Newton Public Schools alum who has recently moved back to the area and very happy to be back. But I share the concern about the lack of funding for Understanding Our Differences next year. In the 2nd grade, my mom was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. I did not know any other 2nd graders who had sick parents. I did not know what the diagnosis meant for my family. And in the 3rd grade, Understanding Our Differences brought in a wonderful woman, self-advocate with multiple sclerosis to talk about physical disability. Not only was the idea of a self-advocate radical at the time, but the woman who spoke invited my mom and I to her house to see what it was like with her adaptations and the accessibility that she had added to her home. I think it would be a detriment to remove funding for a program such as this when so many families are now experiencing disability as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. I know what it's like to be a kid with a sick parent or a sick family member. I also know what it's like to be someone who lives with a mental health disability. The baseline of what I learned in Understanding Our Differences, specifically platforming people with disabilities, was fundamental to my career, ultimately serving as Joe Biden's Director of Disability Engagement on his recent presidential campaign. No program is beyond reproach, no program is beyond improvement, but the idea that you would stop a program with no viable alternative and the forefront or in the budget is a mistake, and it will be a detriment to progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Molly. Up next, we have Nathan Persampieri.
Hi, sorry. My name is Nathan Persempieri. I am an inclusion advocate, disability advocate, and member of the advisory board for UOD. I want to join in the voices that have spoken out against this wonderful program. Understanding our differences is a vital organization. It has been in Newton for 45 years, and it has and will continue to impact children so they can learn how to be inclusive, compassionate, and kind. It has taught many valuable lessons over the years to students. On a personal level, I have been a speaker for the Physical Disabilities Unit and have gotten to speak about what it's like to have a disability. I have also worked with Jenny and others to create a disability awareness curriculum for high school students. I strongly support UOD's $63,000 being kept in the budget. Teachers, students, parents, and especially people with disabilities see the program's value. Some curricula may need to be updated, but I wonder why this cannot be done. I strongly encourage NPS to include UOD in the budget next year. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Nathan. Up next, we have Lee Kolidas.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Leah Kolidas, and I live at 42 Nickerson Road. I have a 6th grader at Oak Hill and a 2nd grader at Memorial Spalding. My 2nd grader is in one of the classes that will lose a teacher next year, putting them into classes of 25 plus students. These are kids who went through kindergarten during COVID, which through no fault of teachers was a rough year. They missed out on so many of the foundational skills that kindergarten students normally build. Last year in 1st grade, I heard from his teachers that this group of kids was the most anxious group of 1st graders they'd ever seen. And that broke my heart. My son is now in 2nd grade, and this is the first year I've seen him settled and happy at school. Although speaking with his teachers this year, I've heard that they're a great group, but they are lagging behind in some of the most basic skills. One teacher told me that some of them don't know how to use scissors properly. How can they catch up and thrive in classes this big? It's not right, especially for this group of kids that I know and love, but for all of our kids, I think classes this size are too big. I heard in Oak Hill as well that the classes are going to go up to 28 kids. The kids didn't get to vote on this override, but I know they wouldn't choose to be in overcrowded classrooms or to have UOD or their strings program cut. And if we allow classes this large this year, how many more classes will grow next year? If we cut strings this year, what arts programs to make your kids want to go to school might we cut next year? What does this mean for our school system? I understand the budget is in your hands, so all I can do is ask you, Mayor Fuller, and school committee to make this right. Thank you.
Thank you, Leah. Before our next speaker, I think we should turn to some of our folks who have raised their hand in the meeting. So Stephen, if you could cue them up after our next speaker, who is Rebecca Tunick. As I said, that hands went up. Sorry, go ahead, Rebecca.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rebecca Tunick, and I live in 18 Van Roosen Road in Newton. I am autistic, and I graduated from Newton Public Schools in 2021. I wrote an email to members of the school committee arguing that the Understanding Our Differences program should continue to run. I feel so strongly about it that I wanted to also present my case in live. I'm very fortunate to have the opportunity to share about my autism and success story to the 5th graders in 7 Newton elementary schools through the UOD program. It is enabling me to help other students accept others, whether they have a disability or not. One of my presentations was at Franklin Elementary School. After my presentation, I received 30 thank you cards from the students. I would like to read some of the letters to all of you to see how the students felt. Student A says, "Thank you for coming to Franklin, Rebecca. I hope you did a great job. I hope you do more presentations in the future. And thanks again for spending so much time with us. Autism is not a disability. It is just a different ability. Everyone is equal, so stay safe." Student B says, "Thank you so much for coming to Franklin. I really enjoyed learning about your experiences. I found that your journey was really interesting and exciting. I hope you come back next year for the upcoming 5th graders. Thank you again." I hope this helps you understand how much this program means to all of us and how it's helping students understand others. Please keep it running with much appreciation and support. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Up next, we have Michael Shin.
Hello, 336 Lake Avenue. Thank you all for allowing us time to share our feedback on the recent proposals to the Newton Public School budget and policies. We are faced with the reduction of classroom sections, which means my rising 4th grader will be in a class of 28 at Mason Rice. The reduction of teacher support in kindergarten, which will negatively impact my rising kindergartner. The reduction of support for the English language learner program, and perhaps most painfully for me, the eradication of the strings program in elementary schools. Curiously, the only area that is getting additional support is technology in the classrooms. I look at all of these changes and my immediate reaction is that we are suppressing one of the most fundamental elements of education, that of creativity. As a professional musician, professor, and higher ed administrator, I want to compel us all to think deeply about the long-term impact of these egregious changes. And I want to focus our attention on the immense benefits of studying music at an early age. The transferable skills one learns through deep study of music cannot be overstated. In addition to creativity, these include curiosity, collaboration, listening, improvisation, compassion, magnanimity, mathematical comprehension, the ability to work effectively within a system, and dedication and commitment to one's craft. In this world of unhinged technological reliance, unchecked artificial intelligence, social media echo chambers, and what I would call profoundly reduced human engagement, we need more than ever to foster these artistic, cultural, and humanitarian skills in our young people. Let's all come together to ensure that this generation is equipped with the skills, habits, perspective, knowledge, and creativity to make a truly positive impact on the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Up next, we have Jessica Shin.
Thank you, school committee, for listening this evening. I am the parent of a 3rd grader at Mason Rice and a rising kindergartner. As you face these difficult budget decisions, I hope you prioritize human connections for our children over screens and technology. The proposed budget calls for cutting a 4th grade classroom teacher at Mason Rice next year, resulting in class sizes of 28 students. Our 3rd graders were in kindergarten when the pandemic began, so they missed a third of their first year of elementary school. They spent much, if not all, of 1st grade in front of a screen. The social emotional challenges of this particular cohort are real and well documented by our Mason Rice 3rd grade teachers and the Mason Rice after school program. It is inequitable that a disproportionate bulk of the proposed budget cuts is falling on these children whose early elementary education was so disrupted and who desperately need more human interaction, not less. Why are we cutting classroom teachers and kindergarten aides when we know that ideal learning comes from in-person teacher contact, connection to peers in the actual classroom, and the use of fine and gross motor skills, none of which can be achieved on an iPad or a computer? Please prioritize the human connections and relationships that will allow our children to thrive creatively and academically, and to find joy in their learning experiences. Larger class sizes, fewer kindergarten aides, and more impersonal screen time will not achieve this. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Up next, we have Oscar Zofer. Oscar, you should unmute.
Fantastic. Oh my God.
We're waiting, so take your time, but you're still muted.
Wait for the prompt to unmute and then click the.
I did not catch that, Stephen. All right, Oscar, how about we'll circle back to you in just a moment. Okay. Okay, then we're going to jump to Jenny Klein Sosa, and Oscar, we will return to you.
Good evening. My name is Jenny Klein Sosa and I live on Arnold Road. I'm a co-chair of the Newton Special Education Parent Advisory Council, and I'm speaking tonight on behalf of our board. By law, the CPAC advises decision makers on special ed issues. In that capacity, we advise that the cuts proposed to the FY24 budget are inconsistent with the core values of excellence and equity that we share as a school community. Widespread staffing and non-instructional cuts run contrary to Newton's commitment to deliver an inclusive, welcoming, and identity-affirming educational environment for all students. Mayor Fuller, please leverage your unique ability to allocate additional funding to NPS as a direct acknowledgement that our kids' futures depend on what happens right now. We ask you and the school committee to carefully consider all possible ideas for accessing funds, like those in tonight's memo, to make our children whole in the short term while you work on longer-term solutions to structural deficits. If you make the intentional choice not to provide vital funding right now, the impacts on our students will be felt immediately and the long-term effects will be grave. Please think about our students with disabilities specifically. We know that larger class sizes will hurt every student, but they will disproportionately impact students from marginalized groups, especially disabled learners. If you reduce kindergarten aides and ELL supports, more referrals to special ed for evals will follow, even beyond this year's spike. If you cut special ed teachers and aides, those classrooms and curricula inclusive and accessible for students with disabilities, gaps between these students and their peers will widen. And if you allow sharp increases in caseloads for the remaining special ed staff, the quality and individualized focus of services for students will suffer and educators will burn out fast. Down the road, these out of district placements, which are costly. In some, Mayor, please allocate in full what our students need to recover losses, close gaps, and propel forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Up next, we have Lori Zinner.
Hi, my name is Lori Zinner. I'm at 41 Marcellus Drive. Good evening, school committee. While I understand this is a difficult time following the failed override, I implore the committee to find funds to restore many of the proposed cuts in the MPS budget for FY24. I would like to commend and thank Chris Bresky for finding alternate ways to fund our schools in light of the failed override. While I wish the override would have passed, our children today, who have already experienced so much educational stress, should not have to suffer the consequences of adult disagreements. To give a specific example, the estimated average class size for fiscal year 24, shared recently, I believe it was 21, does not give a clear picture. It's likely the mode and range of class sizes that would highlight vast differences across schools. There are 12 classes of greater than 25 students expected, with some of those classes being 28 or 29. I realize the presentation stated classes up to 28, with one at Countryside and one at Mason Rice. I am having a hard time accepting this when the current enrollment for the impacted grade at Countryside is 58 and the one at Mason Rice is 57. I understand students move out, but students move in as well. That grade at Countryside has had 3 student starts since the October 1 enrollment report. When I have asked what is the threshold to add a class back, the response I have been given is NPS does not have one. While I applaud the district for maintaining small class sizes for grades K to 2, I would like to point out that 7 of these proposed large classes are slated for grade 4 next year. These are the students that were in kindergarten when the pandemic hit. Increasing class sizes by 10 students in some cases is going to have a large and inequitable impact on these students who have already experienced so much educational shortfall. While the reduction of kindergarten aides doesn't directly impact my family, I have grave concern about the removing of full-time classroom kindergarten aides. My youngest was in the first class that received full-day kindergarten. Having a full-time aide in the class was incredibly beneficial. Not only did this allow for small group instruction without leaving some students to fend for themselves, having an extra adult in the room that knows the students as well as the teacher allowed for flexibility if a child had a problem. I fear that we are stepping backwards in time by not maintaining our commitment to full-day kindergarten with a teacher and full-time aide, as was stated when full-day kindergarten was implemented. Thank you.
Up next, we will return to Oscar Zofer. Hi, Oscar.
Hello, my name is Oscar Zofer. I live on 156 Warren Street in Newton. I'm in 8th grade. I go to Brown Middle School, and I have a physical disability called spinal muscular atrophy. I think it's very important that we keep the Understanding Our Differences program, because when I got to speak, kids could hear the struggles that I went through, that I go through, even on things like a day-to-day basis. And I think that kids understand that it's important to include people with disabilities, that they have to be included differently than most. But when they hear people with disabilities speak, they understand that they are real, people with real challenges, and then they think, oh, I don't want to be part of that problem, and that's really important for anti-ableism. Thanks.
Thank you, Oscar. Up next, we have Sue Cohen.
Good evening. Thank you for the time to address you about the potential budgetary cuts. My name is Susan Cohen. I live on Mount Vernon Street, West Newton. I am a retired and unretired NPS educator, currently working as an ESP at the Ed Center with one of the incredible support programs for high school students. Last week, while putting on my NPS badge for work, I realized that I am very proud to be wearing this badge. I am lucky enough to be working what the interim superintendent has called a premier school system. I could go on and on about what a premier school system does to earn these accolades, but I would rather focus on what a premier school system does not do. 1, a premier school system does not have class sizes of 26 to 28 plus, which diminishes, if not eliminates, the opportunity for educators to establish meaningful connections with their students, which NPS considers an essential element in helping students achieve a positive balance of social and emotional well-being and academic success. 2, a premier school system does not cut counselors, social workers, or special education staff at any level when enrollment and referrals for the support programs are increasing at a concerning rate, as academic success is directly impacted by a student's social emotional support, as these are essential parts of the foundations of successful learning. 4, a premier school system does not pull their ESPs from their jobs to substitute, typically leaving their students without the support they are entitled to. I've worked under the leadership of 6 superintendents during my NPS career. I've always felt that while NPS held me to high expectations professionally, NPS also prioritized my personal well-being as an educator, as an individual, and as a parent, because they knew this was essential for getting the best from me. I implore you to do whatever it takes to avoid eliminating the educational positions and programs that are on the budgetary chopping block in order for NPS to retain its status as a premier school system.
Before we invite up our next commenter or speaker, I just want to remind everyone with their hand raised, if you've already signed up to make a comment, we already have you on the list and there is no need for you to raise your hand. The hand raise feature should best be utilized by those who didn't sign up previously and would like to address the committee during the hearing. All right, up next we have Beth Tischler.
Good evening. I'm Beth Tischler, and I've lived in Newton for 52 years. I live at 287 Langley Road. So why am I here tonight? I no longer have children or grandchildren in the schools. I am here because I helped start UOD 45 years ago, and I served on the board for many years. Professionally, I worked with the Massachusetts Easter Seal Society, doing advocacy and programming well before Chapter 766, the Americans with Disability Act, and I also helped establish the Mayor's Committee on Disabilities. I am here because I have seen the direct value and impact on my children and now on my grandchildren. And I also have seen the direct impact on the community. I'm here because I don't want to deny current and future generations the opportunity to learn about various disabilities and to meet people with disabilities so they can learn firsthand. I'm here tonight because I want the school department to continue partnering with UOD to bring this program to students in the community. Don't shut the door on UOD by taking it inside. Let the partnership continue. I have been greatly moved by the comments from the students and the parents. If you want to know the measure of a program on a community, this is it. It's heartwarming, and I will be devastated if this program is eliminated. Please do the right thing.
Thank you. Thank you, Beth. Up next, we have Debbie Perry.
Oops.
Debbie, you may begin.
Oh, I can begin. I'm Debbie Perry. I live at 81 Clark Street in Newton Center. I've lived in Newton for 54 years. I appreciate the sense of community, our city and its values and the education my sons received in the Newton Public Schools. 40 years ago, Barbara Krupat and I were the first volunteers to bring Understanding Handicaps, now called Understanding Our Differences, to Bowen School. I'm an educator who supervised student teachers getting master's degree in elementary education. Parent volunteers have been the heart of the program. With their parents in the classroom, the children saw that these ideas were valuable. I asked my sons last night, now 50 and 47, what they remembered about the program. My oldest son said he felt the experience exposed him to disabilities and built empathy. My younger son said he learned that his parents cared about the importance of how to speak about and understand disabilities and differences, ideas which he values today. The concern tonight is, why eliminate Understanding Our Difference program? Are the concepts, values, and attitudes presented in this program worthwhile? Has the City of Newton done research on UOD's effectiveness? Were the goals and results of the program evaluated? At this difficult time in our country, shouldn't we educate children at an early age to be more empathetic and kind towards one another? I hope the school committee's decision shows respect for the history of the program. Any decision about the fate should be based on evaluation and discussion with the program's administrators, who are extremely receptive to recommendations for revisions. Please do not shut down Understanding Our Differences. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Debbie. I apologize. Up next, we have Josh Goldstein.
Hi, Josh Goldstein. I live on Swallow Drive. I'm speaking tonight as a concerned resident and parent. Budgets are a reflection of choices and priorities. If the override passed, the choice to fully fund NPS would have been easy. But the decision to not fully fund NPS in light of the override's failure is still a choice, just as picking up yard waste on a weekly basis, for example, is a choice. So let's please not pretend that the voters chose to put NPS in a $5 million hole, especially when the Vote No campaign on the override slogan was, quote, Newton overspends. Mayor Fuller, if you believe that the NPS budget is bloated, please say so. Any budget has fat that can be trimmed, of course, but when scores of teachers are being cut, leaving us with 28 student elementary school classrooms, that's not fat. NPS is facing a budget deficit because its costs have risen faster than the city has been willing to cover them. Certain transportation utilities costs, for example, will increase by 20 and 25% respectively next year. Those costs alone represent roughly half of the budget deficit. I understand budgets are zero sum. Fully funding NPS's budget may mean underfunding something else. These are tough choices, and Mayor Fuller, I don't envy you. But I do implore you to help us close this budget deficit. I implore you to allocate funds to NPS that better reflect our priorities and enables NPS to avoid cutting any teachers or other staff who work directly with kids. Because a budget that at a time of rising student needs forces kids into larger classes with fewer supports does not reflect our priorities. A budget that widens disparities between members of marginalized groups and their peers because, again, we're putting students into larger classes with fewer supports does not reflect our priorities. We know NPS needs a sustainable budget and appreciate your leadership in attempting to use the override as a means of doing so. While others work to find a path forward to ensure NPS's long-term financial stability, please ensure our students, especially our most marginalized students, don't suffer in the meantime. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Up next, we have Kate DeBethune.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
You can hear me? Okay, let me turn my camera on. Okay, hi, thank you so much for giving me the time to speak. I'm here with my son, Jonah, who is a third grader at the Pierce School. I am a cello teacher in the Newton community, and I've had the privilege of teaching young cellists who have participated in the string program in the elementary schools at Newton Public Schools for more than 10 years. I truly appreciate that these children have had the opportunity to begin studying the cello in this outstanding program. So I just want to express my extreme disappointment regarding how the proposed budget cuts would affect the string program and the orchestra program in the elementary schools. I strongly feel that learning to play a stringed instrument affords children the opportunity to create something beautiful with their own hands, hearts, and minds. With increasing emphasis on screen-based technologies in our modern world and the attendant downsides of distraction and inattention, among others, providing this opportunity is as important now as ever. From an educational standpoint, studying a stringed instrument is a tremendously useful catalyst for many other goals, including social emotional learning, as well as hands-on application of STEM principles. It affords a critical opportunity for students to learn to slow down and identify where they must focus to achieve mastery, to learn creative problem solving, and to build executive function skills. From an equity standpoint, the NPS program is a critical opportunity for students who would not otherwise have an opportunity
30 seconds.
to learn a stringed instrument, either because their family members cannot afford private lessons or they're not musicians themselves and it's too far outside their comfort zone. So I'm really hopeful and optimistic that something can be done to reinstate these proposed cuts to the string program and the orchestra program. And my son Jonah had just went around the Pierce School and had almost every kid in the school from K through 5 sign a petition to save the strings and save orchestra. Jonah, do you have anything you want to say about that?
All of them. We got all the classes.
Yeah. He got all the classes to sign. He went around to every classroom with 2 of his friends from school and got a great deal of support from the students at the Pierce School. So thank you very much for
Jonah. Up next, we have Kate Cox. Thank you.
Congrats, Jonah, you're a hero. I'm Kate Cox. I live at 542 Chestnut Street in Waban, and I'm just really disappointed. I'm disappointed that Newton voters didn't show up to vote for the override. I'm disappointed that the schools aren't funded appropriately. And most importantly, I'm disappointed that our children are the ones that are going to feel the impact. I'm also disturbed because in a town where we pride ourselves in equity, the elementary schools and specifically the Zervis School seems to be taking a disproportionate share of the budget cut. The suggested cuts would result in a loss of our assistant principal, our kindergarten aides, and 2 classroom teachers. I have a kindergartner and a 4th grader at Zervis, and I'm a member of the PTO board. I am so grateful for the amazing teachers that have played such an important role in our children's lives. I'm so frustrated that we keep making it harder for them to do their jobs that they love. Due to social and emotional issues in the classroom, there have been at least 4 occasions when our kindergarten class has had to be evacuated due to one of the children becoming severely dysregulated. What would our teacher, Miss Naylor, have been expected to do if she didn't have the support of the kindergarten aide who is with her daily? Would you feel comfortable having your child tell you that they don't always feel safe in the classroom because there's so much chaos? Our rising 4th and 5th graders will also be deeply impacted by reducing the number of classes and raising the maximum number of students per class to 28. I've had the good fortune of volunteering in my son's 4th grade classroom, and I can tell you that with 19 students, Mr. O'Rourke still has his hands full. These 4th graders were in 1st grade when schools were shut down for COVID, spent 2nd grade on Zoom and in school a few hours a week. You get the point. Finally, we find ourselves in a year of normalcy. We have a happy teacher that has a manageable number of children, and we have engaged students, and now that's in jeopardy. I'm tired of people saying our kids are so resilient, they'll be fine. I didn't move to Newton for my children to be fine. I moved here for them to thrive. Our Zervis teachers are the right group of teachers to help our children thrive. I ask
us to talk. My name is Betty Wong, and I'm a mother of a 2nd grader and a 4th grader at Bowen. And I'm also a child psychiatrist. I believe that the elimination of the strings program in the elementary schools is incredibly short-sighted. The money spent on the program is an investment in the children here and their futures. I understand that there are financial concerns in our town, but we are in a mental health crisis. And at minimum, we need to maintain the services in music and the arts. We need activities that allow children to express their emotions, connect with others, and build community. They need to experience joy and beauty in the world, especially after the disruptions these kids have already experienced through the pandemic. Orchestra is part of something bigger than themselves. You cannot build a strong middle school or high school orchestra without a strong foundation in the younger years. We owe it to the children of this town, regardless of the family's financial situation, to allow all of them to have the option to choose an instrument that resonates with them. I ask that the strings program and the orchestra program remain in the elementary schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. Up next, we have Deborah.
Children who've gone through the UOD program. Tonight, I am reading the statement on behalf of Tassie Warren, who couldn't be here this evening. Tassie is a longtime community member, current NPS parent, and a child development expert. Dear members of the school committee, I have been an advisory board member at UOD for many years, have volunteered in the classroom, ran the marathon to fundraise for UOD in 2017. Our family has experienced the program to be a wonderful way to engage children in learning about other people, to encourage their healthy and developmentally appropriate curiosity, and to normalize talking openly about difference. My son was so inspired and curious about deafness after a UOD session that he spent the last 3 years teaching himself ASL. In a world of increasing divisions, a message of inclusion in our community is more important now than ever. And doing this as early as possible is critically important for children. As they're developing and building their understanding of the world around them, and learning about how to be part of a community and engage with peers. I encourage the Newton Public Schools to continue to provide this important programming and to work collaboratively with UOD team and to continue to have this be embedded in our elementary schools across the city. Tassie Warren, NPS parent, longtime community member, and child development expert.
Thank you, Deborah. Up next, we have Christine Dutt.
Good evening. My name is Christine Dutt. My address is 13 Crescent Street in West Newton. I have 2 NPS students. I have a 6th grader at Day and a 9th grader at Newton North. I want to add my voice to those advocating for more funding for Newton Public Schools. Specifically, I want to amplify two things. First, the proposed fiscal year 24 MPS budget does not adequately support our kids' academic needs, their mental health needs, and their SEL needs. The proposed budget does not support Newton educators. Newton deserves better, and our kids deserve better. Second, I ask Newton City government to find one-time funds to restore the fiscal year 24 budget as much as possible and to find renewable and reliable funds for Newton Public Schools in fiscal year 25 and beyond, so we can avoid repeating this annual budget crisis next year. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Christine. Up next, we have Kim Smith.
Hi, thank you very much. I wanted to express my gratitude to the Newton Public School System. I have three kids. I live in Chestnut Hill, by the way. I have three kids who have gone through a high school. One just got accepted to Stanford Medical School. I have another one who's very, very happy at her school. She was a special ed kid who didn't do as well in private schools, and we transferred over to the high school. And I have a kid in high school right now who's doing fantastic, thanks to the teachers. I wanted to just clarify some facts. The high school, which is bearing the brunt of an unprecedented teen mental health crisis, the likes of which we've never seen in our generation, is at full capacity. Both high schools have predicted enrollment, according to the mayor's own statistics, that will be increasing. This does not include people like me who came from high school, because they have no way of knowing that we were coming. But meanwhile, the teachers' classrooms are going to be going up. Classroom sizes will be going up. In the middle of a teen health crisis, we lost a guidance counselor last year. This just can't be happening. This isn't our values. Teachers have an average of 200 kids. Their class sizes that I've seen rise from 25 to 30 are unacceptable. Teacher salaries are not rising over 4%. Over 3 years, their contract is 8.5 to 9%. It's an average COLA, cost of living, as other finance professionals have met. Yet the teachers are constantly under attack for being like the cause of the budget problem, which I disagree with. I think the cause for the budget problem was the use of ARPA funds to fund things that shouldn't have been funded. For example, $500,000 went to the senior center, which, by the way, is getting no cuts. That should have been bonded. $3 million for Washington Street. $1.5 million for the acquisition of 47 Walnut Place. That should have been with CPA funds. I asked my representatives why that happened. No one got back to me. $2.45 million
so much
for affordable housing on Williams School parcel.
And
Again,
next, we have Jane Franz.
Good evening, and thank you very much. Gifted musicians have spoken eloquently about the importance of maintaining our elementary strings program, but my family story begins at the opposite end of the spectrum. As a child, I didn't have the opportunity to be part of a music program, and this was why I desperately wanted it for my three sons. But because of my own lack of experience, I didn't have a clue as to how to make this happen. When should a child begin taking lessons in how to join an instrumental group? And this is my greatest concern about this cut. That families like mine, and more importantly, families that don't have the financial resources to provide lessons, will lose out on this valuable experience. The Newton music teachers and the well-sequenced programs provided the guidance that set the foundation for my family. All three sons began taking lessons and were part of instrumental groups in 4th grade and continued right through 12th grade in high school. My sons are adults now, but their background that the music program provided for them continues to enrich their lives immensely. I watch them as they listen to music and can see an appreciation, an understanding, and attentiveness that comes from years of musical experience. When programs like this are cut, opportunities for students to make connections with adults, other students, and have meaningful experiences are lost. And as past experience has shown us, they are lost forever. At this particular point in time, we can't take the chance of losing experiences that provide a home for our school, in our school, for students that by their very nature of the experience, attend to their well-being. These programs light up the eyes of our students and are what make them want to come to school. I urge you to reinstate the elementary strings program so that all students can benefit from it. Thank you very much. My name is Jane Franz and I live at 12 Glastonbury Oval.
Thank you, Jane. Up next, we have Jonathan Swirsky.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jonathan Swearsey. I live at 184 Islington Road in Auburndale, Massachusetts. I hear this evening a lot of pain from our community regarding the cuts to the school. And what I want to say, and what I think is a real challenge, is that this remains a zero-sum game. I do not want to see a librarian laid off because we've chosen to save understanding our differences. I don't want to see aides let go because we've decided to preserve the orchestra program. The only person I have seen who has put together a program or a plan to help address the budget issues in a serious and meaningful way is Chris Bresky. And for that, I thank you. I've read it in detail. It is smart, it is intelligent. It addresses one half of the problem, which is the cost side. On the revenue side, which is the total amount of money available to the school, I look to you, Mayor Fuller, and I challenge you to sharpen your pencil to tell us what cuts you are making elsewhere in the operating budget without even making any moves against the school, and then find more money. It is essential. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan. Up next, we need a moment. Emily Porras. So before I see Delia Chung, who was earlier on the list, we can. Oh, I see. Okay, all right. Up next, we have Emily Porras.
My name is Emily Porras. I live at 11 Cumberland Road, and I'm a fourth grade at both school. I'm here because I've heard that string instruments are getting cut in Newton schools. I play the flute, so I'm not affected by the cut. During one of our lessons, my music teacher let us know the sad news. We all got emotional, and for the rest of the day, we had a really sad mood. Violin was one of Miss Boker's first instruments as a kid. I wonder if by string instruments in elementary school, how many students we are preventing from finding instrument music. That's how Miss Boker found her love for music and how she is where she is today. About a third and fourth grade both school play string instruments. That's people. Thanks for listening. I really hope you can find ways to get a bigger budget and to restore the string instruments. Bye.
Thank you, Emily. Up next, we have David Penn.
That was a hard act to follow, but I'm grateful for the opportunity. My name is Dave Penn. I live on 6 Willard Street. I have a senior whom you already heard from tonight and an 8th grader at Bigelow. And my background is I am a professor of theology, religion, and ethics, but I also for the last 20 years have been teaching marching band in public schools, the last 10 of which was at Framingham. And I also play for the New Phil Orchestra, Newton's own orchestra right here in town. And for a couple of years, I served on the Newton Youth Commission. So I feel like I have a lot of different angles of entry to this discussion. And I just want to make 2 quick points. I'm trying to use my fast Midwestern speech pattern to get this all out on time. I think that cutting the strings program is not only a bad idea for the reasons that people brought up earlier very eloquently, but I also think that cutting the programs now to save money, we will actually be paying for them later. For the missed benefits that we would be getting rid of. So the 2 reasons, one is that we know there's significant data that shows that the more arts we have, the better student learning outcomes are. So if we want to improve student learning outcomes at a low price, we should actually increase our arts, not decrease them. Second, we know that arts programs are about belonging. I recently had a student at Framingham who comes from a very toxic family background say to me that I was the first person that ever believed in her. And she told her counselor that the only reason she kept coming to school was to be in band. And if we cut these programs, students like that we will be needing to follow up with many, many, many more resources on the back end, and they won't be getting as good of an experience. So please keep these programs in place. Thank you for your time and for all of your work.
Thank you, David. Up next, we have Delia Chung-Am.
Good evening. My name is Delia Chung-Ham. I live at 54 Beaconwood Road. I'm a proud parent of a senior at Newton South and a 4th grader and a 2nd grader at Zervis. My 4th grader had MCAS this week. He asked me why students have to take MCAS in math and ELA, and I told him that it was because the schools are trying to see what students are learning. He paused and thought for a moment and then said, well, what we really need then is a communication MCAS, because that's something my class needs to learn about. We need to learn how to communicate with each other. He's 10. He's recognizing the dire need that our students have to be supported in ways that are critical to their education. The current 4th graders will only partway through 1st grade when school shut down for the pandemic. This year is really the first normal year for these students that they've had since kindergarten. The teachers are being asked to manage so many different things. School is a space not only to learn about math and reading and writing. This is a space where our students are learning how to communicate with each other and how to be part of our community. These are lessons that do not neatly scale from 20 students to 25 or 28 students. I understand that absorbing a $5 million deficit is going to be painful for our community. I also feel strongly that our 3rd through 5th graders should not be asked to shoulder this pain. They're at the beginning of their educational journeys and deserve the opportunity to build a strong foundation where they can be comfortable with math, reading, and writing, but also where they can be supported as whole people, where they can learn how to communicate, where they can have access to music, where they can learn about the rich diversity in our community, and where they're being set up for success as students and in life. Thank you so much for listening, and I please hope that you can find some ways to make some changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Delia. Up next, we have Philip Coasters.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Philip Coasters. I live at 25 Stoneleigh Road here in Newton. I have 2 girls at Horace Mann Elementary School. One of them will be a rising middle schooler, and one of our daughters will start in kindergarten this year. I'm actually very sad and almost angry that I have to be here tonight again, because this whole discussion reminds me of the discussion that we had about a year ago. I was actually kind of inclined to go back to my notes from last year's meeting and basically read them out again. But if you're interested, read them in the comments in the Globe last year. This is Newton. That was how I started my speech last year. And I'm incredibly disappointed about the fact that we are again dealing with what is, at the end of the day, a very minor budget gap. Where's our plan? We talked about a 2% gap last year. We're talking about a 2% gap this year. Will we be talking about a 2% gap next year and the year after and the year after and the year after? Where's our strategy? Where is our plan? Where are we 10 years from now? Do you want to be the committee, the elected officials that are the ones that are gradually declining the reputation and quality of NPS? Other cities are catching up. What are we doing? We are working on we are cutting our foundation. We are cutting music programs. We are cutting at student well-being programs. New NPS staff is actively out there right now, encouraging parents to cut back on IEPs. Where do we want to be? People have a choice. And with this continuing, taxpayers will leave Newton and go to other cities that invest more in their school systems, and which cities that are bringing up their school systems to a higher quality. This is unbelievable. This is shocking. Professor Chen and others have mentioned it earlier on this call here, how important things like an early musical education is for
Thank you, Philip.
kids at that age.
Up next, we have Christina Kobas.
Hello, good evening. Thank you for giving everybody the opportunity to speak this evening. Research shows that children who participate in quality music programs go on to earn higher test scores and have a greater likelihood of post-secondary success than their peers who don't. Yet, music programs across the country lack support, commitment, and funding. Let's do what we can to not let Newton fall into that category, especially since we have the commitment and support. To reach students is to build community. This approach can drive success in the classroom, regardless of curriculum, because this is the foundation of a music classroom. This is exactly why music teachers are reaching and connecting with students in ways that other classrooms are not. Our teachers are reaching students while supporting their community and building a supportive environment for those kids. For some students, music is the path to success in the classroom. For some, it's athletics and others visual arts, but many, it's music. Let's continue to provide music for all levels in Newton. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Christina. Up next, we have Ellie Axe.
Hi there, my name's Ellie Axe. I live at 1615 Center Street. I am calling in today as a deeply concerned parent. I have a rising fourth grader who will be one of the kids to bear one of the burden of these cuts. She's a strong student, she's a self-advocate, and she loves learning. But being a rising fourth grader means she was in kindergarten when COVID hit. It also means that she's slated to be in a classroom of 27 or 28 kids in her class next year. So I'm calling in with two messages. One, to just implore and ask that the city look for any potential funding. I don't like the cuts across the district, but I especially, it like hits really hard at home to think about the ways in which the burden will be felt here. I'm also ready and willing to write the state. And I would say to all of those listening, like, let's be ready and active in challenging ourselves to find funding. I don't want the youngest kids in our schools to be the ones to bear the burden. So to the school committee, who I know cannot raise the level of funding, I ask that you make a commitment tonight that you restore class sizes. And that's one of the things that if the city or if the state is to find funding, that you find a way of making that commitment to our youngest learners. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ellie. Up next, we have Parul Kothari.
Hi, my name's Parul Kothari, and I'm at 346 Hartman Road. I have 3 children currently enrolled in the Newton Public Schools, a 9th grader at South, a 7th grader at Oak Hill, a 2nd grader at Memorial Spalding, along with an upcoming kindergartner next year. We moved to Newton for the schools because we heard great things about them. We have loved the diversity in the classrooms, the strength of the teachers, and the strong community in each school that my kids have been in. But I find it very, very disappointing to hear about the proposed cuts to the budget, especially the cuts to the staff, which will lead to increased class sizes. This is especially important today as the students in schools now have missed significant class time over the past few years because of COVID. While that was necessary at that time, those kids have not caught up to where they need to be academically. And there has also been, I've seen that in my kids for sure. There's also been significant issues with social emotional challenges and mental health after the pandemic. I've heard about behavioral issues in all of my kids' classroom. And I'm also deeply concerned about how these cuts are going to affect their mental health, especially for my teenagers. They are finally back in school, loving it, or connected with their teachers, with their schools. And that is going to get worse with cuts to the budget and the larger class sizes. They were depressed and were not interested in being at school. And that's not going to get better if we're also cutting things that they love about school, like art, music, extracurricular activities, sports. These kids need more support in school now after COVID, especially with special educators, counselors, and everything else that's there. They do not need increased class sizes at any level. And I'm going elementary to high school. It is unreasonable to have these children, including mine, have to sacrifice because of budget issues that they had no say in. They're the ones who are going to pay the price. And so I urge you to do what needs to be done to get our children the education they deserve and find a way to fully fund it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Parul. Up next, we have Susan Nikitin.
Hi, I'm Susan Nitkin. I live at 15 Champion Street in Newton Upper Falls. I came to speak on behalf of the string program, but I'm going to start by just quickly mentioning, the Understanding Our Differences program on behalf of my late son, Noah. I raised three children. My youngest is 23, and I can attest to the fact that understanding and embracing people with differences, and especially neurodiversity, is the utmost important, life-changing, and often life-saving. I'll start with that. As regarding the string program, my youngest child, who's 23, went through the program, grew up in a musical household, but not I'm a pianist, not a string player. She first heard the violin in elementary school and saw it and decided that she wanted to play it. It was completely life-changing. She is now, she graduated in music and is now in a professional musician. She is teaching students with disabilities music, general music. So what she learned, what she gained from Newton Public Schools is not just for herself, and it's very important, deeply important emotionally for her, but it impacts the rest of the world. Everything that someone does in this world, whether it's understanding our difference, whether it's music, moves out into the world to make the world better. And I am devastated that it would be considered the unprecedented step of cutting Newton string program. And if people play the strings, they generally need to start early. Starting in middle school makes it hard for people once they get to high school to be able to play in an orchestra. I also want to quickly add that every student needs to find their own place. And for some—
Susan, up next, we have Christina Reed.
Hi, thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Christine Reed, she, her. I don't envy the position that the board is in right now. I'm a nurse. I'm a proud mother of a deaf Begalo 6th grader, and I'm so grateful to have my child in the CAPS program. We actually live in Grafton, but they pay a good amount of money for my child to be able to attend the CAPS program, and for that, we are just unbelievably grateful. All of the cuts proposed will have devastating impacts on our children and for the children in the future. As someone previously mentioned, once you lose programs, teachers, aides, it's a battle to get them back. I would be remiss if I did not say how meaningful and we all know that representation matters, and drama has been a wonderful, welcoming, inclusive environment, which puts the sentiments of equity and inclusion on display. Clearly, the Understanding Our Differences program that have taken place through the years is working, given the number of hearing students who have reached out, learned American Sign Language, and forged friendships with our kids. Please open up conversations for creative budgeting that don't include harm to our students. They deserve so much more. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Up next, we have Elsa Gennaro.
Hi, my name is Elsa Gennaro of 14 Hope Street. As a parent and as a PTO leader, I implore you to work cooperatively and collaboratively to find the funding to close this budget gap. Let's all stay firmly rooted in the reality of this moment in history. Our incoming kindergartners were about 2 years old when the pandemic began, and so many youngsters have not developed normally through their early childhood because of the lack of interaction with peers during COVID. I know several who have the ability to speak in sentences or develop speech at all initially was severely impacted. But we're planning to reduce the number of adults that we have working with the students in kindergarten classrooms across the city. And as you've heard, many students have not caught up in the areas of self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, or responsible decision-making. And this has resulted in interactions in school that are far below grade level expectations and caused additional challenges in classroom management. But we're being forced to cut many classroom teacher positions and increase class sizes, especially at the middle schools and some elementary levels. And several of our district's newest teachers, who will be the first to be cut, are educators of color, who have offered new opportunities for students to feel connected to our schools and excel. I don't think I need to remind you how excitedly this school committee embraced Dr. Anna Nolan and her dedication to individualized learning. But now we're planning to increase class sizes How does this individualized learning happen successfully in classrooms of over 25 students? Please find the funding to close this budget gap. Thank you.
Thank you, Elsa. Up next, we have Julie Winsett.
Hi, Julie Winsett, 33 Alexander Road. Thank you for the opportunity and thank you for your efforts supporting our children. As a physician, I can speak to the tremendous medical, including mental health impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. Our children have been irreversibly scarred and damaged by the pandemic, and they need additional supports at school to help them succeed academically and mentally. Even with current supports, many children continue to struggle and have not yet met their pre-COVID potential. We are still recovering, and this is the time in which they need all the support they currently have, if not more, and certainly not a time to be cutting. I can also speak to this from a personal level as I have 2 children at Countryside. The proposed cuts disproportionately impact Countryside with proposed elimination of 2 classrooms. My son's 4th grade classroom would be eliminated and the class size would go up to 29 plus kids. If more kids enroll, upwards of 30 kids in one class. My son struggles receiving adequate support even in the current class size, and if the class were 1/3 larger, it would be devastating. My daughter just finished kindergarten. With kids just 6 years old, many of them new to school, the kindergarten aide was critical to have a second trained adult in the class. It was a challenging enough year as is, and I simply cannot imagine if these challenges were doubled by eliminating a full-time kindergarten. His bandmates are a diverse group, many of whom would not otherwise have had an opportunity to be exposed to music. NPS speaks of diversity and equity, but with proposed cuts, equity would be further negatively impacted and the gap would further widen. Families will continue to leave Newton for towns with better schools. As other experts have outlined, there are ways to find the money and make the budget work. Again, our children have already been irreversibly scarred by COVID. As we try to emerge from the pandemic, it is a time to support our children, not abandon them. Our children are our future and they deserve our support as they try to recover from the irreversible harms of COVID. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Up next, we have Adam Lipson.
Yes, hi there. I'm going to keep this relatively brief and I apologize, my video is not working too well here. I did a quick Google before this meeting and something struck me. And it struck me that class sizes in Boston public schools will have a lower potential number of students per class and in a lower ratio of a high quality education, and that the city supported its schools. Why would I move here from Boston if my ratio and my class sizes are the opposite of what's desired? You know, it also strikes me that there's an inequitable cut to schools, particularly mine, Countryside, where we're losing several teachers, and our class sizes in cohort will be dramatically different than some of the others across town. It doesn't feel very equitable. Mayor Fuller, you hold the purse strings, as has been said many times. Don't be like my old neighbor in Chicago, who became increasingly unpopular due to poor decisions and lost their job. Make the right decision for Boston, for Newton Public Schools. Keep our class sizes low, keep our ratio low, and keep the emphasis on education. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Up next, we have Iris Schlesinger.
Yes, Iris Schlesinger here. Good evening. I'd like to share some thoughts from service parents. We're extremely concerned and disappointed at the proposal to allow elementary class sizes to grow as high as 28 students per class. Increasing class sizes undermines so many other investments being made in academics and inclusivity. These reductions contradict many core values promoted by the district and its leaders. Equity. Larger classroom sizes counters to our commitment to equity. While our 4th graders at Servas, which is one of the most diverse schools in the city, are in classrooms 28, most 4th graders in the city will have fewer than 20 students per class. This creates an inequitable situation across students. Excellence. Newton has always aspired to be among the best school systems in the Commonwealth. We will fall far short of this position by allowing 20 students in elementary school classes. This is significantly higher than peer districts and Boston public schools, and some schools in Mexico where I grew up and doesn't shine for academic excellence. Inclusivity. Servas is one of 2 strike schools in the district. Successfully including a diverse range of learners in our integrated classrooms requires manageable class sizes to provide all students, especially diverse learners, the attention needed to succeed. Pandemic recovery. As others have mentioned, this is a cohort of children who were severely impacted by COVID disruptions. Overcrowded classroom will further widen academic, social, emotional gaps. The last one here is partnership with teachers. In order to have the best schools, Tutor has always sought to attract and retain the best teachers. Staff reductions will already be a challenge for teacher morale, and requiring teachers to take on this oversized classroom will only exacerbate the challenge. We strongly believe that class size increases of the proposed magnitude will compromise the foundation for our system, and we implore you to consider class sizes as a fundamental and non-negotiable priority. Thank you.
Thank you, Iris. Up next, we have Amy Davenport. Amy, before you begin, I'd like to read aloud a message from our IT director who's helping to promote. Oh, we're good. All right, I won't read out loud a message from our IT director. Amy, you may begin. Oh, are you muted? Yep, still muted. Oh, there you are.
Sorry, it said I couldn't unmute. Hi, my name is Amy Davenport and I live at 86 Park Avenue. Last week, I watched a member of the school committee seek an innovative, responsive, and responsible solution to the budgetary shortfalls that have forced our school leaders to propose the unthinkable. Cuts to the instructional core, cuts to the equitable curricular opportunities we provide to support diverse student interests beyond that core, cuts to the program we have designed to cultivate an empathetic and inclusive school community, and cuts to the supportive services we provide to our youngest and most vulnerable learners. These cuts hurt kids. They also endanger our new superintendent's ability to create a culture that promotes equity and rigorous academic standards for all students, as she was hired to do. Last week, Chris Bresky presented a path forward for our schools that acknowledges that children's needs and our Newton family's needs have never been higher. I watched our school committee members respond to this proposal, expressing curiosity, open-mindedness, and their clear commitment to protect and support our kids, educators, and families. And then I watched Mayor Fuller respond to that proposal by banging her fists and threatening to cut school funding further should that creative proposal be approved by our elected officials. She has since offered no creative solutions of her own. To say I am disappointed and embarrassed by the lack of collaboration in her response is a gross understatement. Mayor Fuller, your campaign website states you know how important it is, and I quote, to help heal the social and emotional hurt and the unfinished learning our children have endured in recent years. Seconds. I implore you to make good on the promises you once made to our Newton families to safeguard and strengthen our schools and community. Tonight, the school committee has heard so many compelling arguments about the damage these proposed cuts will wreak on our school community. I am hopeful tonight that our school committee is brave enough when they discuss Chris Bresky's proposal and committed enough to our children and its priorities to vote in favor of this new proposal and see whether Mayor Fuller is willing to make good on her threats or her promises. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Up next, we have Susan Yospin.
Hi, I'm Susan Yospin and this is Juliet. We live at 156 Kirksall Road. I voted in favor of the budget overrides across the board because I believe in maintaining Newton's academic excellence by supporting these important programs, and understanding our differences, the string program, and by maintaining the current size of our classrooms. My daughter will share her thoughts on why you should find the money to support these programs. I also have an 8th grader at Day who has benefited from experiencing band these 4 years. It's been fundamental to his mental health, and he has been benefited from going through the Understanding Our Differences program. So now Juliet will speak.
Hi, I'm Juliet, and I'm a 6th grader at Day. I went to Cabot, and I could not take part in the band or chorus in 4th grade because of COVID. I played trumpet in my 5th grade band, and while it wasn't for me, whenever we would have band, I would always see lots of kids walk in excited to participate. Band, orchestra, and chorus are all ways for students to express themselves in fun ways to show creativity. I've seen lots of kids years younger and older participate in all of these, and I myself participate in chorus and love it. I've been surrounded by music all my life. And I think if you get rid of these extracurriculars, it will take a large toll on students' intellectual and emotional health.
Thank you for considering finding the money to maintain our excellence in our schools.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you both. Up next, we have Vladan Janovic.
Hello, this is Vladan Jovanovic. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, terrific. So I think the parents so far, everybody who has spoken thus far has done just a wonderful job of articulating at a more personal level why it is important that these various programs are not cut. I'm going to take a slightly different angle at it and actually have very pointed comments that are in favor of Chris's proposal, given my background. So I work in the investment finance, specifically focused on the healthcare industry. So I can speak with certain degree of sophistication about both finance, which I earned my degree at the very best school for finance called the University of Chicago. And then secondarily, I invest all day long exclusively in the healthcare industry. So I know a little bit about the healthcare benefits. And I can tell you, I mean, the simple one here is some of the benefits that the town is providing in terms of the Medicare Part B reimbursements are quite unusual, while very generous and considerate. They are unusual. And to that end, there are plenty of other both state, federal, and other programs that could actually be used as supplements to alleviate the financial pressures that we have imposed upon ourselves by funding this. Secondarily, this is basic investment math for anybody who's paying attention. The interest rates going up, so 100 bips of interest rates going up actually closes the pension liability funding gap to a tune of 10 to 12%. You can do the math in terms of how much the rates have gone up. To me, it is irresponsible to continue with the rate of funding in light of one, lower cost basis given where the public markets are, and two, given the high interest rates. Lastly, it is your fiduciary duty representing MPS and students to vote for this and not for the town's finances.
Next, we have Jennifer Alam.
Yes, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please begin.
Excellent. Hi, my name is Jennifer Elam. I live at 140 Church Street, and I have a 7th grader at Bigelow and a 5th grader at Underwood. And I would just like to come on to second some of the comments that have been made so eloquently by many of the parents about the challenges facing our students as well as our staff and this committee. I appreciate all of your hard work. I know this is not easy, so thank you for that. But I do want to urge you to consider Chris Bresky's proposal. I think that he has some compelling arguments that we should consider reducing or eliminating some of the funding for OPEB and the Medicare funding that was just mentioned as well. I also would urge Mayor Fuller to look and see where we can find this money from elsewhere in the budget. I think that our children have been impacted greatly over the last few years by the pandemic, and cutting these funds now is short-sighted. And then lastly, I would also like to second the speaker, I think just a moment ago, whose reaction to Mayor Fuller's reaction to Chris's proposal. I also was really taken aback by Mayor Fuller's reaction. I thought it was an innovative and creative solution, which is what we need now. And I would urge the mayor to consider it and not to react with such knee-jerk negative reaction. So that's all that I wanted to say. I lastly will close that I did move here 4 or 5 years ago, and in large part due to the
Thank you. Up next, we have Sylvia Bottinelli. Hope I pronounced that right.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you. Silvia Bottinelli, 38 Beecher Place in Newton. I would like to build on what others have said to advocate for the theater and performance arts programs in our schools. My child was here, is a 6th grader at Oak Hill. The theater program was really instrumental for her to help with the transition to middle school. Working daily with the cast of the winter musical, Matilda has developed deep connection with a diverse group of peers, raised confidence, fostered a sense of belonging and self-esteem. The performative arts are invaluable. They're an incredible tool to build inclusive communities and to support mental health, bringing together students from various backgrounds. And with cuts to theater programs in public schools, underprivileged students will be particularly affected, not having access to this kind of opportunity through private after-school theater programs. So cutting the theater program will undermine crucial opportunities for socio-emotional learning. And if an MPS aspires to be an equitable school system, it should consider limiting cuts to the after-school theater programs in middle schools and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. So we have actually come to the end of our pre-sign up list of speakers. And I know there are several folks on the meeting. So if you would like to give a public comment, you still have the option at this point to raise your hand and indicate your wish to speak. Okay. All right, Eileen, you are ready to speak at this point?
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm Eileen Sandberg, 260 Franklin Street. I am one of the co-chairs of the Newton Commission on Disability. I would like to read excerpts from a letter that we have sent to the school committee and to Mayor Fuller. The Newton Commission on Disability has voted unanimously to express our strong support for the Understanding Our Differences program in the Newton Public Schools and to request that the program be continued in the coming year. Understanding Our Differences has provided Newton students with a greater awareness and understanding of the lives of people living with disabilities in our community for 45 years. It is not an exaggeration to say that generations of Newton residents have been positively impacted by this program. From young children who learn how to include a classmate with disabilities in their playground games to adults who appreciate the greater understanding in the general community. Many members of the Commission on Disability, including both co-chairs, have been volunteers with Understanding Our Differences over the years, and we have seen the benefits firsthand for ourselves and our children. We are very proud to live in a city where such a comprehensive program has existed in our schools. How can we expect our students to understand and include their classmates with disabilities automatically without support and discussion? If we truly value equity and inclusion, we need to teach it to our students, and the Understanding Our Differences program gives that opportunity. We are teaching our students that those with disabilities are not other because they may be different from what we are familiar with. We are teaching generations of Newton residents that those who may have differences are us, as much a part of the Newton community as anyone. The Commission on Disability understands that some families, particularly some with an autistic child, would like to see the changes in the curriculum for disability. We understand that the EOD program has been very willing to work with Newton families to address those concerns, and we support these ongoing efforts. However, the Understanding Our Differences program educates about 10 different disabilities, and we strongly urge that the EOD program not be discarded because of curriculum issues in any one session. We ask Mayor Fuller and the school committee to reconsider the importance of the Understanding Our Differences program and restore it to the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Eileen. Up next, we have Carolyn Fertig.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. My name is Carolyn Fertig, and I do not reside in Newton. I am a Newton High School teacher at Newton North, and I'm a special educator. I'm speaking on behalf of UOD, As a special educator, I had the opportunity for 5 or 6 years to be the representative at Newton North, taking students over to the various elementary schools. This opportunity was one of my highlights over my 20-year career here at Newton North. I still remember talking to students many years after they presented to the elementary schools about their learning differences. People who had autism were able to speak in front of elementary school students and really talk about the impact of their disability. And these experiences were so rewarding for our kids and for the community. And I even tried to bring it into my own community, talking about how fabulous UOD is and also the people who work for it. I also would love to preserve the UOD's current line item in the FY24 budget and preserve the presentations, which again, I said were remarkable and also life-changing for our students. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, and I hope you will reconsider keeping UOD because it makes a lasting impression for our students who present and everybody who experiences these presentations. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Carolyn. Up next, we have Diego Pupin. And once again, this is the last call for anyone wishing to speak by raising their hand.
Yes, I also want to speak in support of the after-school programs, theater in particular, music and sports. If there is a thing that people know about Newton is the schools, budget cuts to programs and the proposed plan to increase the school size will just destroy the reputation that the city has. And we clearly know that family with students are, large part of the population here and what's, really setting the mood for the city. I strongly invite you to consider the long-term impact of budget cuts because it will be very, very hard to recover. There are examples of school systems around the country that have budget cuts that took decades to recover from. Again, consider the reputation that Newton has in the greater Boston area, in the Massachusetts, in the Commonwealth, and across the country, actually, for good schools. And consider that the impact of these choices will have on the reputation of the city. Last thing I want to say very quickly, budget cuts, affect the less privileged people that cannot afford to find school programs outside schools because they don't have the resources to do that. So while wealthy families will be able to find sports and theater and music outside schools, our underprivileged community members will not be able. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Diego. Up next, we have Anita Hamilton.
Thank you. I am a teacher assistant, a special ed here at Oak Hill Middle School, serving currently as a long-term sub in science in 6th grade. I have been teaching for 25 years in the public system in various places, and I taught in Georgia when Katrina hit Louisiana, and our class sizes under emergency situations had to go to 30 to 35 students. And I just wanted to share about that experience, though it was an emergency and we were glad to do it to help people in crisis. It was extremely difficult and challenging. And as an educator, I just wanted to share that because as a teacher, we want to provide the best, safe, and affordable education to children. And I don't think we can do that with that class size. So we need to look at the budget and think first for the children, especially after COVID, to provide the best learning environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. Ben, are we? Okay. So Ben Schlesinger, we see that you have a hand up wishing to speak. You should be getting a prompt to promote to panelists. This is how we can recognize you to speak. You should accept that prompt, and therefore you will be able to unmute and turn your video on if you choose.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for your time. There have been so many great speakers tonight, and I'm going to try not to repeat too many points. What I want to emphasize is that our budget is a statement of priorities. This year, there isn't enough money to go around. yes, I hope that Mr. Bresky's proposal will be passed. I hope the mayor and the city council will squeeze every rock in town to find every dime you can. But realistically, I do recognize there likely won't be enough money to bridge the gap we face. So the message I want to give you is that regardless of whatever new money may be added, what you're hearing tonight is that the current allocations within the budget do not reflect our values in the way they prioritize resources. Class sizes need to be table stakes, especially for our youngest learners. It is my firm belief that the school committee should instruct MPS administration to rework the budget with a constraint that the prior guidance on elementary class sizes not be changed. There are a lot of cuts in this budget that give us a lot of cause for disappointment, but if we don't stand here as a community and agree that class sizes smaller than 25 for our youngest learners should be non-negotiable, then I don't think we're doing our best to advocate for our children. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ben. Up next, we have Tara Hickle, sorry.
Hello. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. My name is Tara Hickle and I live at 99 Needham Street. I have a first grader in the Spark program at Countryside Elementary, and I have volunteered with Understanding Our Differences this past year. I ask you to reinstate funding for UOD. One of the reasons my family chose to move to Newton was because of its culture of inclusion, its reputation for acceptance. My son is the joy of my life. He is kind and funny and curious and deeply feeling. Also, he has several significant disabilities, including autism. He faces a lifetime of challenges living in a world not designed for him. As a UOD volunteer, it has been a gift to be able to listen to the experiences of adults with disabilities who encourage and respond to children's natural curiosity. Giving our children a chance to learn from people with differences helps break down barriers. By reaching children before they have formed strong stereotypes, UOD helps them see the value in embracing differences, including their own. I can't add much more to the chorus of support for UOD that I've heard throughout this evening, but I wanted to leave you with one moment of Bo's Day that happened last week. At bedtime each night, we ask each other questions about our day. Last week, the question we chose was, when did you feel loved today? And my son responded, when Felicitas and I high-fived after phonics. I ask you to support the 45-year history of UOD in facilitating the acceptance and understanding of people with disabilities like my son. Thank you.
Thank you, Tara. So I don't see any more requests to speak. I think we are just checking over the list one final time. Yes, I think we're going to go ahead and close the hearing at this point. Thank you very much to everyone who spoke. We appreciate hearing your perspective. It will be incredibly helpful for us going forward, having heard your concerns and your thoughts. So we thank you once again for sharing them with us. The FY24 public hearing is now closed, and we will call to order our regular meeting.
Madam Chair, may I make a request? Can we
Yes.
possibly have a 5-minute break to either stretch or use the facilities?
That sounds like a good plan to me. All right, everyone, we'll be back in
Thank you.
about 5 minutes with your indulgence. Alrighty, let's get back at this. Thanks everyone for indulging us in a little stretch. We do not have anyone signed up to provide public comment tonight during our regular meeting. And in fact, we kept public comment as an important part of the meeting in case a member of the public wanted to comment on one of the items of the agenda specific to our regular meeting. That is not the case, so we will move on to our interim superintendent update. Kathy, any words?
Thank you, Tamika. Really very few. Like you, I want to thank everybody for their thoughtful, heartfelt comments to our students who had opportunities tonight to speak, parents, community members. I also want to assure you that we continue to meet as a central staff team. We continue to review. We continue to try to dig deep. We continue to provide, lists if in fact additional money is identified. So we are already at work continuing to look at this budget as we go through this process. And really that is my only update at this time.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you very much. So we do not have any items on the consent agenda tonight to move. So we can skip and move quickly into our discussion and updates. Our first item is a collective bargaining update. And Kathy Shields, who is the co-chair of the negotiations subcommittee for the NTA, will lead us in this update.
So Steve, can you go to the first slide? So as we gave the community an update on our collective bargaining efforts last in early December. So we wanted to come back to you so that you understood what the school committee was doing with regard to collective bargaining this year. The school committee has the obligation to negotiate contracts with all three of our unions. The Newton Teachers Association, which is by far the largest of our three unions, includes 5 units. Those are units A through E that encompass all of the basically teaching professionals in the district. The largest units are Unit A, who are our classroom teachers and our psychologists, and Unit C, who are our paraprofessionals or ESPs. Our Unit B members play in various supervisory roles throughout the district. Our Unit D staff are our substitutes, and our Unit E staff provide a variety of functions in our business and operations unit and in other support roles throughout the district. We also negotiate with the Union Educational Secretaries Association and the Newton Custodians Association. 2 of our 3 contracts expire this year on August 31st, and our other contract, the one with our custodians, expires on June 30th. These contracts are typically 3-year contracts, and so every 3 years we enter into collective bargainings with all of our unions. In general, our contracts govern the salary that we pay to our employees, the benefits we provide to our employees, and generally terms of their working conditions. So we've listed some of the specific provisions in the contracts that are typical in the bullet points below. I'm not going to read them to you. You go to the next slide, please. So just to provide an update in terms of timeline, typically we negotiate with the Newton Teachers Association, the largest of our units, followed by negotiations with our other unions. We began negotiating with the Newton Teachers Association back in October. We've had a number of meetings since then. We've met consistently between every 2 and 4 weeks. Both parties, both the school committee and the Newton Teachers Association, have made proposals and counter proposals to the other, including proposals about financial terms. We've started negotiating with NISA, the Secretaries Association, in February of 2023. We've had several meetings with them, again, meeting about every 3 to 4 weeks. We have exchanged some proposals and counter proposals. We had a meeting earlier this afternoon. And we are scheduled to begin negotiating with our custodians on April 26th. So this slide, you've seen a very similar version to this before. We presented this back to you in December, but just to emphasize so that everyone understands what the goals of negotiating the contracts are from the school committee's perspective. Our primary goal is to support positive, flexible, responsive, and adaptable teaching and learning conditions to meet students' needs in our current environment, which is very different from the world we used to live in. It's important to us to pay our employees a competitive salary to ensure both that we retain and attract high quality educators and staff, but also to ensure our financial feasibility and sustainability of our budget. We've been talking about that a lot over the last couple of weeks. And as I'll give you some details further in another slide or two, the salaries and benefits that we negotiate are a really important part of our budget because they're a major driver of our expenses. We also want to be able to provide our educators with equitable structures and supports to be successful in their roles. That means things like professional development, planning time, curriculum resources, and time for collaboration among them. And I think I previously addressed the need that we have as a district to attract and retain high quality educators. So in the context of our budget deliberations, it's important for us all to remember and for the community to know that salaries and benefits for all of our NPS employees make up about 89% of our current budget. And in the budget proposal for FY24 that we've been considering in detail over the last couple of weeks, make up about 87% of that budget. I think that's as it should be. Our people are what we spend most of our resources investing in. The salary components of our budget typically increase in our contracts by a cost of living adjustment. We refer to that as a COLA. It's usually a percentage increase on employees' base salaries. And our COLAs over the last decade or so have ranged from a low of about 0% to at the top end about high end of about 3%, depending on both the year and the employee's level of experience. In FY 2024, we will automatically be paying an additional 0.5% COLA because of the last year of the current contract that we've negotiated. That contract has a COLA that carries into FY24, at least for the NTA members. So for NTA members, salaries are determined by something called steps and lanes. Steps increase every year for an employee's year of experience until you get to a top step. Lane increases compensate and reward employees who get additional educational qualifications, whether it be a master's degree or a master's degree plus a certain number of credits or a doctorate degree. If there is a 0% COLA in our contract, so if we're making no adjustments for cost of living increases, that still costs in our budget about $3.6 million every year for NTA members. And that's because of those step and lane increases. About half of NTA members get those step increases. And in terms of breaking it down between steps and lanes, most of that money is because of steps rather than lanes. About half of our employees are stepping, such that they are getting annual increases because they are increasing in years of experience, while about half of our employees are on the top step. So for those employees on the top step who are not changing lanes because of additional educational achievements, their salary increases are only the COLA, or the cost of living adjustment. While employees in the NTA are stepping, the average step increases, at least for Unit A members, it differs for some of the other unit members, the average is about 4.2% a year. And in some past contracts, the COLAs have been different for employees who are still getting step increases as opposed to employees who are on the top step of the contract. So we're going to show you on the next slide an example of how this works in practice. So this is the salary contract for the current contract for Unit A members. And you'll see in the left-hand-most column, the steps that increase from step 2 up to step 15. And the lanes that are in the columns to the right of that, that increase an employee's pay depending on whether they have a bachelor's degree, a master's degree plus certain educational qualifications, or a doctorate degree. And you can see the ranges of salaries for NTA Unit A members in this table. One of the other pieces of data that I think it's important for us to keep in context when we negotiate the contracts with our unions is how our employees' salaries compare to the salaries offered by surrounding and competitive districts. Because we need to, in order to meet our goals of attracting, and one of the things that really matters is how much those educators could get paid if they were to leave Newton and go somewhere else, or to accept a job offer from somewhere else other than accepting a job offer from Newton. And we've sort of broken some of these salary comparisons down. This chart relates to salaries for Unit A members who are largely our classroom teachers and our psychologists. And you'll see that this is actually data from not the current year, but last year. And that's mostly because we don't have data from all of these other districts for the current year contract. Some of them have contracts, some of them don't. So we're using a time period for which we have pretty good data. And you'll see that Newton is in about the top third of our competitive districts in terms of the salaries we offer to our Unit A members. If you go to the next slide, that slide shows how our salaries for our Unit C members, our paraprofessionals and our ESPs, compare to the salaries in other districts. Unlike teachers who are paid an annual salary, our Unit C employees are paid an hourly wage. And so these numbers look different because you're looking at hourly wage numbers as opposed to annual salary numbers. And you'll see that with respect to our top step Unit C members, we pay very competitively, in fact, well above our surrounding and competitive districts. So we wanted to provide this context for the negotiations that are ongoing. We continue to have collective bargaining negotiations sessions scheduled every couple of weeks. We intend to do that until we are able to reach a contract with our unions. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you all have about this process.
Rajiv, I'll start with you if you have any questions or comments.
Not at this moment. Thank you.
Chris, any questions or comments? How about you, Anping?
Probably a quick question. For Unit C, for the bottom step, we understand that top step. How how was that determined? Unit C members are kind of sub teachers, not full-time professional teachers,
Yeah,
right?
so our Unit C, most of our Unit C members are who we refer to as our ESPs, our educational support professionals, our aides.
Yeah.
So a lot of our classroom aides, a lot of our special education aides fall into the Unit C category. And so is what you're asking sort of what the breakdown is between bottom step and top step?
Yeah, in terms of the steps and lanes, still the same kind of system as the Unit A.
So the step piece of it is the same, and you'll see, actually, I don't know, in this presentation, we didn't include the steps for Unit C, but Unit C members do have steps. They don't have lanes in the same way that the Unit A members have. But there are steps within Unit C.
Okay.
We also have 2 categories of Unit C aides, and this data here is provided for Category 1 aides. We have Category 2 aides as well that have some different and additional qualifications. So you can see in these 3 charts, both the bottom step comparison, the top step comparison, and then a comparison about how many steps there usually are in our surrounding districts. So you'll see that we in Newton have a lot more steps for our Unit C professionals than a lot of other districts do.
Okay, that probably explain, the Unit C top steps on the very top of all the comparing districts. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Ping. Emily, any questions or comments? Paul, you're on the bargaining team. Any questions or comments for you?
Thank you, Tamika. I thought Kathy gave an excellent explanation of what's going on and how this process works. And I just wanted to make 2 points. I think she may have said this, but just in case she didn't, there's a presumption which we intend to live by, that we always negotiate in good faith in these negotiations. But they are negotiations, and the other side also negotiating in good faith. Sometimes an agreement is not always possible within a time frame that we would all hope. And while we hope that an agreement will be possible, I just want to explain for members of the public that there is a state-sanctioned statutory process in the event the parties cannot reach an agreement that provides the opportunity for mediation, for example, if the parties agree to that, and fact-finding and other steps under a state jurisdictional regime that could happen if we can't reach an agreement. And I also want to mention that under state law, strikes by the employees with whom we're negotiating are not legal. And that although there have been teacher strikes in several districts around town, around the state, they've always been found to be illegal. And our hope is that things never get to that point here. So I just make those 2 points.
Thank you, Paul. I'm going to reiterate that we are hopeful that we are far away from that outcome. Our contract is still good through the remainder of our school year, up to and including, when does it expire?
So with the Newton Teachers Association and the Educational Secretaries Association, it expires on August 31st.
Okay,
our custodians contract is good through the end of the school year, so June 30th.
Thank you. Perfect. Cove, any questions or comments? Mayor Fuller, questions or comments?
Kathy, excellent explanation. May I, if we can go to the slide, collective bargaining salary table for NTA Unit A. That one. Could you, I know how to read this, but it took me a while years ago to learn. Could you tell somebody how to read this table?
Sure.
Thank you.
Let's start with the column that says masters, because a very high percentage of our teachers have master's degrees. So what this means is that an incoming teacher who is a first-year teacher for us starts on step 2. And so if you go to the line with a 2 on it and the column that says masters, you go across and over and you meet, I'm actually having trouble reading that number.
61. Yeah.
There you go. So 61,2, thank you so much, Steve. 61,285 and 97 cents is the annual salary for a first-year teacher in Newton with a master's degree. And so for every year of experience that teacher gets, that teacher would move 1 line down that chart. So in the second year, would make $64,386. In their 4th year would make $66,889. Now let's say in the 5th year, that teacher gets an additional 30 credits on top of her master's degree. And so between years 4 and 5, she would move a column over to the right. And so on line 5, column masters plus 30, her salary in that year would be $74,486. Teachers keep earning those annual step increases until they get to step 15. So if you go down to the bottom in the master's column, a teacher in Newton who's taught here for more than 15 years and who has a master's degree, his or her salary would be $105,599. And that's how this table works.
And again, most of our salary or most of our Unit A NTA members are on the top step. So half.
Roughly half.
Roughly
half of our Unit A NTA members sit on step 15.
Correct.
Can you also explain the COLA line?
Emily, can you pull your?
I'm so sorry.
Can you explain the COLA line? Because that's the last
Yeah, so
piece that you haven't described yet.
Steve, can you blow up the top piece of that again? So you'll see up at the top. So in the currently negotiated contract for the last year of that contract, so the school year that we're in right now, from September 1st, 2022 to September 1st, 2023, for employees who are getting annual step increases, the COLA in that contract year is 1.75%, whereas the COLA for employees who are on the top step is 2%. And as I mentioned briefly, that COLA was broken down in terms of it was given in 2 chunks throughout the year. So there is a 0.5% of that COLA that carries into the FY24 budget because it wasn't all given at the start of the school year.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you, Kathy. Any further questions or comments? Okay, so we will periodically return, and by we, I mean Kathy, who does a brilliant job of these updates, and we will make sure that we are speaking to the committee, but also to our community about the status of our negotiations. So thank you, wonderful job, Kathy. Okay, up next, we have a general catch-all for FY24 budget review. This is an opportunity for any school committee members to ask outstanding questions on any part of the budget that we've heard presented thus far. And just to give us, again, one more opportunity to discuss items that are outstanding. I'm going to separate that from the proposal that we were asked to consider, submitted by member Chris Bresky. So first, do we have any questions that we would like to address? Go ahead, Paul, and then Kathy.
Liam, I think they'll be for you. I think they're pretty straightforward, and I'm only raising these 2 just to make sure we have the numbers straight about 2 topics that were brought up tonight in a lot of comments. One was the strings program, the music program, where we have an expense and then some offsetting fees. And if you could just tell us what the gross expense is and what the fees under the new fee proposals would be. So what the net amount is for the strings program, I think would be good to have before us. And then the other topic that came up a lot tonight was the Understanding Our Differences program and what that cost is, just so we have those numbers in our head. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. So the FTE piece for the strings is a 1.5 reduction in staffing through the elementary program. 1.5 FTE with benefits is approximately $138,000 as a gross number. We then netted out the fee revenue loss by not having these students paying that fee, which we estimated at $40,000. So the net cost or savings, excuse me, by if we were to enact that would be $98,000. So if we were to restore it, we would need to have $98,000 into the strings to have the string program continue in Newton. Then I think some people had mentioned that cost for Understanding Our Differences. Again, they're not an employee of ours. It's a contracted services, if you will. I need to double check that, but believe $63,000 is the correct number for Understanding Our Differences. Welcome.
Thank you, Paul. Kathy, I think I saw a question from you.
Yeah, so Aisha, this one's for you. Sorry to your turn. When we discussed the elementary budget, I had asked Aisha to think about whether there was a way to apply the thesis that Kathy Smith had talked about of reducing instead of eliminating. And I asked Aisha to think about whether it would be possible to reduce both the band and the string offerings in the elementary schools while still preserving both of them. And I know she's done some work on that, and I would just like you to share with everyone else the work that you've done.
Thank you. So following that meeting, I checked in with Richard King and we reviewed the enrollment, talked about the implications of that kind of a split. And there were a couple of different reasons. We landed in the place that it was not feasible for two different reasons. The first being that reducing instruction to once every other week for young learners, 9 years old, learning an instrument for the first time was not going to adequately support their learning, and then would compromise both instrumental instruction as well as strings instruction. The other is the logistical. The instrumental instruction is considerably larger. There's a larger number of students involved in the instrumental and band program than there is in the strings program. Coordinating the logistics of the FTEs across the 15 schools and the resulting changes and scheduling to accommodate that across the schools was complicated as well. It is complicated regardless, even as we prepare for the not having string instruction. There are significant complications there as well. However, it was cleaner, it was easier to implement, in addition to the educational outcomes that I mentioned at the outset.
So thanks for doing that work. I appreciate you looking.
Appreciate all the thinking and the ideas. We'll look into anything.
Thanks, Kathy. Any others? Go ahead, Emily.
I'll ask both my monetary questions, so thank you for that. I actually have a question about understanding our differences. So one of the things that you had talked about, Superintendent Smith, was the concept of possibly a working group with multiple partners sitting at the table, including understanding our differences, to have a conversation of how we all move forward, understanding and hearing lots of feedback from multiple perspectives tonight. And I just, if it was kind of it's unfair of me to say this, but if the funding gets cut, I just want to ensure when we're discussing under the future of inclusion and the inclusion curriculum, particularly elementary school, that even if the 63,000 gets cut, UOD is a separate organization. They're a separate 501c3. I'm not saying that that won't put a significant dent in their operational budget, but I just want to make sure that if that happens, that what you're talking about, what you're envisioning in terms of this working group, that they would still have a seat at the table. Because I feel like there are portions of their program that were highlighted a lot actually today about the visiting the classroom and humanizing people who are adults who have similar disabilities that students in the classroom may have as well. That portion in particular that I think are valuable and should be part of the conversation and the discussion. And I just want to make sure that if we do as a body decide to go ahead with the cut of the $63,000, that understanding our differences will still have a seat at that table. I know you won't be here. However, I'm just
no, that is true. And that is a good question. I have had, you know, a short conversation with Dr. Nolan. You know, obviously she's watching the budget process and, you know, we're updating her as best that we can through the process. So this goes back, Mayor, I can't quite remember the day. I know that I was in your office. We had a lengthy meeting. I thought it was a good meeting. Again, coming into the district, truly understanding 45 years, having been a special education teacher and truly working with my own students and understanding how critical that type of a program was. You know, 45 years later, and I really did appreciate from people that spoke this evening in support for this wonderful program, you know, talked about that there could and probably should be opportunities to really reevaluate your curriculum. You know, things have changed. When I look at this district and I hear again about inclusion and integration and the things that we do for a sense of belonging for all students every day in our classes, working with our teachers, that being one of our really our strategic and our system-wide goals. So your question again, and I said this, we talked about the word good faith. It was said in good faith to make sure respectfully that we brought, I called it a task force, brought people to the table, looked at, and I'm actually hearing from my own team. You know, there are some units that they feel are better accepted than others. There was some concerns about a delivery model. You know, it's wonderful and it's so inspiring for me to see your parent volunteers when I listen to parents that tell you they started the program, you know, over 45 years ago and continue to, I really, many of you told me that you were volunteers and asked about the program. I think I was especially impacted by listening to students that were presenters, the teacher from Newton North that talked about how critical it was for her students to have that opportunity. And my quick conversation with Dr. Nolan was about student voice in this. So I am committed at this point to working with Dr. Nolan and my team, you know, to making sure that we're having a task force, we're reviewing a program. And I clearly understand, I know your CPAC has talked about not wanting to lose that funding. What program would want to lose funding, you know, for the very students that they're serving? So that's what I am committing to right now. I will continue to work with my team. We clearly have heard the voices this evening, as each of you has.
I really appreciate that. I agree with everything that you said. And I'm happy to hear that there will be this task force, hopefully, and that we'll land on a curriculum, whatever that ends up looking like, with, you know, we're Newton. we take a little here, we take a little there. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out of that work. So thank you.
And I think, again, speaking for my team, I'm sure we will keep everybody updated as we begin this process.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Pink, go ahead.
I really appreciate both Emily and Kathy, your comments, very eloquently said. And we heard loud and clear tonight and our emails and everywhere. Certainly I was involved very early, as I mentioned that when I was a graduate student, I wrote a project, you know, a research paper and interviewed the founders. And also I was the volunteer at my daughter's Horace Mann School. So, and by the way, this past Monday, I observed the 5th grade intellectual disabilities, which was quite a difficult topic. Let's face it. Intellectual disabilities, it's a very broad term. And I understand, Cassie, you mentioned that the proper time change now, the new thinking, new research, new discovery of this intellectual disabilities. It's a very broad concept. And so I understand there might be some concern in people thinking about the content, the delivery, the process. And I made a little bit comment to the program director, after I observed the class. But one thing I really impressed is the students' activities. The speaker who was graduate from this program, and she had autism and she has some challenges, and I could see clearly and students see clearly. But that's wonderful process and model, and especially the parents, the volunteers, the coordinators, the classroom teachers. It's all collaboration, and this is wonderful and has such a legacy. So I think probably many people have the strong feeling like me, and so it's very special. Let's consider this, the feature of this program. So I'm happy to hear that task force. So let's make a very deliberate decision how to maintain and keep this legacy, and possibly, have more experts involved in this, how to develop the curriculum, make it a little bit more updated if necessary. But, rather than simply say, well, we shut up money, so that's the end of it. That's I could see why people feel so hurt of this. So I fully appreciate this kind of feeling, and I think we do need to make a very responsible and treasure this program. Has such a long history. So thanks.
Thank you, Ante. Any others? Oh, two others, and then I'll go. Go ahead, Paul,
Thanks.
and then Mayor Fuller.
I'm less optimistic about a task force, and here's why. This item was presented to us as a budget reduction and a programmatic reduction, with truly very little explanation for what flaws currently exist. And we've heard overwhelming from the community, from parents, teachers, students, about its strengths. I've heard casual comments about, we don't want to have a program that pities people, that others people, and so on. But in all the comments we've received, the vast majority, 99% of the comments we've received, the evaluations that have been presented to us are quite the opposite. That it's a program that informs, that's based on empathy, understanding, and that even though it's episodic as a program in the schools, it's not a long-term program, leaves lifetime impacts. We've heard that from folks. And frankly, what I'm worried about is splitting the baby, Emily, splitting the baby. That will lose the good of it by not funding this organization to carry out the vast majority of what they're carrying out during the next academic year. Task forces tend to go on, and meanwhile programs diminish. So if you're suggesting that there'd be a task force proceeding while this program is reinstated, that's one thing. If you're suggesting, and again, you won't be here to do all that work, if you're suggesting, well, let's wait and see, and meanwhile, the folks at UOD won't have certainty about what they will be providing in our schools, that doesn't feel quite as good to me. So I don't know if you've thought it through more than you've stated, or whether what I've just said is helpful or what, but I just throw that out to you.
I do know that early on, there was some conversation about the curriculum and the delivery that was cause for talking about pausing some of the programs and looking at the resources, updating the program. And I know that was conversation that we had. As we went along further with the budget deficit that we were dealing with, we felt at the time it was clearly a time to pause it. It is $63,000. It doesn't sound like a lot of money, but when you're reducing a budget, you know, looking at a $5 million deficit, at that point, that was in the discussion. So you're absolutely right. You know, you can certainly have a task force. You can take a look and work with our Understanding by Design team and work with, and Paul, not to take a step back, but it's been interesting. You know, I've been here almost 10 months now, and we talk a lot about data, and I believe, and this is probably some of those very reasons. And when you look at data, you know, are we looking at, you know, teachers in classrooms, you know, principals, looking at the delivery? What are some of the things that we can check to make sure that if we have the ability to make it better, and this is working together, this is not to be critical. This is to take a look at a delivery model, at the same time looking at what we do in our classrooms every single day for our students. And I see great value of, again, somebody coming in and talking about the life that they have lived, the challenges. I believe kids understand that completely. So if you were to say, superintendent, we want to put, you know, this back in the budget, you know, we still have all the concerns that we have. We would still commit to working with understanding our differences. And we would work to improve it from the delivery model, and at the same time, maybe capture some information about the impact, you know, for what you can capture for this, because we all understand looking at some of those presenters. I can just imagine how that felt for a student going into a classroom and getting letters from other kids talking about that they saved for a long time. So I don't know how you put a value on that. I very much will work with my team to support whatever the school committee and the community decides at this point. But I do want to be really clear that there were concerns. We talked about pausing some units. We had this information from many of our special education parents. So there are some things that we will continue to look at, but I understand what you're saying.
Thank you, Kathy. Other Kathy and then Mayor Fuller.
That's okay. Go ahead. So my question was sort of about, we've talked a lot in general about the delivery model of understanding our differences, but not a lot in terms of specifics. And so I guess my question is whether one of the concerns about the program is its very heavy reliance on parent volunteers. Because while I hear so many of our community members who have been parent volunteers and who found that both rewarding and engaging and meaningful, I also believe that I've heard that it's great when it works, but it is also very hard to get enough parent volunteers to make this program function efficiently and effectively. And so I guess what I'm wondering is how do you balance that out? Like, is a model that depends so heavily on parent volunteers something that works, or something that it's great when it works, but there are so many logistical and administrative challenges that it really hampers the delivery of the material?
I think you are correct. It truly is dependent on the training for the parent. You are standing in front of up to 20, 23 students, you know, in a classroom. That's not always an easy task. That is a skill. I believe, again, even when I talk about the delivery model in my head going forward, is making sure whether it's presenters coming into a classroom, whether it is a parent volunteer, you know, that we're supporting that so the right thing can happen for our students in those classrooms. So I would really have to reach out again to my team that has been around. Aisha, of course, I'm looking at you, who has been a principal for a number of years and witnessed, you know, the program in a school. And I know there were some concerns sometimes about the reliability of parent volunteers?
There's a variety of different pieces, and I think the reason you haven't heard in-depth reports of those conversations that we've been having has been because these have been behind the scenes and directly with understanding our differences out of respect for the deep partnership we've had with them for years. That talking about challenges or areas for change have been conversations that we were looking to have directly, and those were ongoing at the time of our budget crunch here. I think what we're faced with right now, and the decision that we would have made had we had more money may have been different, and may have likely, in my mind, would have been different in terms of a process for more ongoing review of curriculum and conversation. What has happened, however, is that we have a massive budget shortfall. And at a time when we're cutting core programming and increasing class sizes and things like our strings program, which have dramatic impacts not only at the elementary level, but for programming at secondary, we then looked at things that were supplemental to the programming that we're providing. And so looking at this, as much as it has been a valued partnership, as much as it has a history in Newton, as much as it played an amazing role in being a pioneer 45 years ago and spearheaded some of this work, it is now supplemental to the work that's going on in our schools every day. And so this is a little bit of background, I think, to understand some of the conversations that went into the decision in thinking about its elimination, which I understand, particularly for people who have been involved, particularly for people who feel that they have profound memories or impact of having had those experiences. I get that, I understand that, and I don't want to minimize that at all. And the difficult fact is, from where we sit, we're making a lot of decisions right now that are impacting many children, that are forcing us to think hard about a number of different things. Thank you, Kathy. Mayor Fuller.
I appreciate this discussion so far, so thank you, everybody. In addition, a combination of Toby and Aisha maybe, excuse me, Liam and Aisha, you're off the hook, Toby, sorry. Can you remind us of exactly how many classrooms are, I can't remember if it's 25 and more or 26 and more, just clarify for me, just for my memory. And if we were to add an aide to each of those classrooms, what that approximate cost would be?
I can tell you that there are 12 classrooms that as of right now are slated to be at 25 or higher.
And Liam, what do you use for an average with including benefits for that type of aid? What would you ballpark? And it can be a range.
Yeah, I'd probably put it in the $45,000 to $50,000 range for that. So if it was $50,000 with benefits times the 12, $600,000.
Thank you. All set, Mayor Fuller?
Yep. Thank you.
Go ahead, Cole.
If would you be suggesting adding that to the 3rd and 4th grade classroom that would be larger? Would that be the suggestion with the aides? Because I guess in that case, my question for Aisha would be, is that a model that we use very much at 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade? How much would that alleviate the stress on the teacher? I would just imagine that the teacher is still writing reports, doing all the things that the teacher does. I think aid usage is in my experience much more meaningful at younger grades. Certainly they could still work on stations and other things, but I just am curious to your opinion on that.
I'd be interested in speaking more with the team about it. I will say this, I think that I think we appreciate all help. It is not, the aid model is not something that we, years ago when I first started here, there was a position called class size aides, and it was a common practice that that there was a certain allocation of aides that were assigned in August or September each year as we looked at where the highest class sizes were. And those aides were deployed across the district. I will say that it was not common at that time to have class sizes of 28, however, and we weren't coming out of a pandemic. So the needs, the needs, while increasing pre-pandemic, I'll be clear, not all of the needs are new, but they are heightened. I think that I think that some of it may depend on the makeup of the classes and the particular needs of the classes. It's a decision that I would want to make in conjunction with the principal and team who knows those students well. What is certainly true is that each class has its own, how the needs of each class and what benefits them most can differ. I would say that obviously if we had a teacher as our first, from my perspective, tends to be the first choice. Aid support is welcome as well.
I think we did employ that model at Ward when you had a class of 27. You had an aide, and I want to remind everybody that come January, we were able to pull in an additional teacher, a teacher coming back from the leave.
Thank you, Cove. Go ahead, Chris.
Just one clarification on that. The 12 classrooms is grade 3 through 5, correct? So that does nothing in terms of mitigating larger class size at the middle school level.
Correct. Thank you. All set, everybody? So I have a couple of questions of my own or comments. Aisha, last time you said to, I think it was Kathy who was asking why strings, why the cuts to this particular program, and your response was because it was the last one that was added. That didn't sound like the full thing. So I was wondering if you could give us additional context as to sort of the range of factors,
possibilities that we looked at,
range of factors that contributed to this decision or recommendation.
The numbers of, so the idea was at the time, what could be preserved? We didn't want to entirely cut all music programming or all of the elective music programming for students in grades 4 through 5. So the hope was, as I had shared in our considerations, that preserving things as much as possible without making wholesale cuts was part of the consideration. Some of it was the implementation, what could be implemented and the ease of implementation, and retaining as much of what we had as possible. Strings has fewer participants than instrumental music and band. So that was a component there. And then this other piece as well, which was in terms of the fact that it was not always offered, and the instrumental program had been here for all students always, and the other had not, the strings had not.
Okay, thank you. I knew there was more there. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to.
I must have been nervous if I didn't tell you the whole thing.
Or you were very tired.
Such a
but anyways, I appreciate you giving that greater context on that. And I also was listening closely as Emily, I see you. Yep.
Oh, sure. I just want to shed further light on that. I knew at that last meeting too, there were a variety of different things that we had considered that we hadn't on a variety of different fronts that I had intended to share, most of which will probably escape my mind now. However, relative to this, other things we considered moving it to 4th grade and to 5th grade and not having a program at all in 4th grade. We considered eliminating it altogether. That didn't seem, that hurt a little too much. So we really looked at a variety of different options in terms of the music instruction piece itself to minimize to be able to continue to make a dent in our share of the budget responsibilities, while also not having them carry too much of a burden for the students or the program itself, understanding that the decisions that we make in elementary have implications down the line for secondary.
No, definitely. I think we all get it and we all appreciate that this is not a want to do, but a have to consider type of a decision. And one of the speakers very eloquently laid out that band, I think they said it, the speaker, that band was the thing that got their student to school. And as a mom, that one strikes me as being a little too close to personal experience. So I get it. I think we all do. It's a wonderful program. We don't want to lose it. And speaking of wonderful programs that would be painful to lose, understanding our differences, I think, you know, I lift up everything my colleagues have said already and everything that we've heard from the people who spoke during the public hearing. I think we definitely heard a lot of strong cases in support of understanding our differences. We heard one of the speakers talk about how because of understanding our differences, their student was able to stand up, that classmates were able to stand up for this particular student who was experiencing some middle school teasing or bullying. Another student or another speaker said, shouldn't we educate children at an early age to be more respectful and kinder to each other? So I heard these things and I thought, yes, understanding our differences does do that. However, the Newton Public Schools in general does that as well. So then I started thinking about, it's like the chicken or egg, which came first? I don't know, about 45 years ago when this program originated, certainly the Newton Public Schools wasn't as inclusive or as welcoming or as deliberately, I don't know, empathetic and kind as it is today. At least it's trying to achieve that type of an environment for our students. But it is today. And so part of the secret sauce of the success of this program is that it's happening here in this district, where that's a focus, a core one of our district, of the educators who are here. So I hear the kind of reservations about doing a working group, and I hear the reservations about cutting this program entirely, but I think there's a path forward so that we can absorb the most impactful and resonant parts of that program and go forward together with that, and kind of just allow the educators to absorb the parts that were problematic. I hear that, and I think when you all sit down and you work together as educators and as people who are staffing and running this wonderful program, you can come up with a solution that makes sense. And I'm going to turn away from that to a question on fees, Liam. So I don't think I heard any members the other night talking about the fees or asking any type of questions or having reservations about the fees, which doesn't mean that we don't necessarily have them. It's just a realization of we're at a time where we have to increase fees to offset some of their costs. But I do have a question about the parking, or about the Newton South parking fee. That one, to me, a $25 increase, bringing that fee to $200, it seems out of whack with the fact that the bus fee is now, what, $400 or projected to become $400. And parking is really it's a privilege, you know, driving your car. It's a privilege that not every student has access to. And certainly we want to encourage ridership on the bus. That's better for the environment. It's better for our walking, biking, transportation safety around our schools. So why not have a fee that's more commensurate with the bus fee? And I know what you're probably thinking, which is that Newton North has a much, much lower fee. That's on City Council. I wish they would address that. But here we have the opportunity to address this fee for our students. So tell me about your thinking there.
So the thinking has been, and I think what we've done in the past, and maybe it actually may be what you're suggesting, is that fee has actually, so that $200 rate is the semester fee. So 2 semesters is $400. So we've actually tied it. Previously, it was $175 times 2. So it matched previously the annual bus fee and going up, going up this amount, the $200 then times 2 semesters would be the $400. So it does measure or does match, but I'm not sure if you're saying it should be higher.
I think I missed that.
Okay,
The hours late. I will admit that.
So-
However, I don't know. I do think maybe the answer is leaning on our partners at City Council, who they also don't like the fees. So this is probably a bit of a non-starter, but it does seem that our objective is to increase the ridership of the bus and to drive down the folks who are pun intended, I suppose. But I don't know. I think this is one where I would urge our fellows at City Council to raise the Newton North fee, and this fee for South. Yep, I see it's a per semester fee. I guess that is commensurate with the bus. Strike that. Thank you, William.
The school transportation steering group, they have been trying. So just to put it on the table, so Newton North, the students park on the street.
Yeah.
And at South, they're on, for like, on school land. So the difference there, that the parking at Newton North actually goes to, I believe, the police department, and they have raised that fee a little bit. I think it may be up to about $75 now, but it is still lower than what we are charging. So that has been brought up, and I think there would be some movement to try and continue to move that over to make it comparable if can. But that's something I think we have to discuss with our partners at the city as well.
Very good. All right, that's it from me. Emily, you had a last one. Go ahead. Thank you, Liam.
Just a quick 2-second thing about parking at South. There is a group of students who are not just parking because it's cool to park at South. It's because they have jobs. They have to pick up siblings at other schools, and they need to have a car available. So just keep that in mind. 2 quick things. One is, Aisha, I'm also interested in hearing what people who were around 11 years ago had to say about how the aids worked. And I know that it's not necessarily preferable, but it's less expensive and it could possibly be an option. I think in 2012, this is right before the override, I think almost 20% of elementary classes were 25 and higher. So that was one of the reasons why we did the override, was because of class size and enrollment pressures. So just know.
I think that was 43 or 44 elementary classrooms had 25 and more. It doesn't make this situation good or better. It's just relative. It was much higher in our recent memory.
And hopefully people with some institutional knowledge who were around at that time.
Yes,
have
I
some
came in
thoughts and
2013,
opinions.
so I came when things were getting better.
Yep.
I do want to look at the cost though of like I would want to talk with the teams and have their input about how best about the needs in these particular schools that are impacted. The other thing I'd like to look at is the cost of 12 aides versus 6 teachers. Because we're an aide for each classroom versus it's one more teacher in each one of those schools that would further reduce class sizes. And so I'd like to cost that out and take a look at that and have that in mind as we look at if things are possible. Would you be able to have that for us on the 24th, our next meeting? Oh, yeah. Yes. Okay.
Actually, can you even ballpark it, Liam? Because I think it's that we won't hold you to this precise number, but ballpark it.
So 6 teachers at 92,000 is $552,000. So it's actually slightly less than actually having 12 aides that, have benefits as well with that. So that would be, and the 6 teachers would, I guess, just explain that one more time. 6 teachers, if you look at our book, we've got the enrollment reductions, and we do right now have 2 reserves that are scheduled. So maybe just explaining, and maybe we can get in further detail the next time, but in terms of actually restoring classrooms back, it is in this 5 to 6 teacher range.
Yeah. It would be adding one teacher to each one of those. There's too many notes in here. I've got the class size, I've got it all sketched out.
I think that just the confusing part is it's not necessarily 12 teachers that you need to add back to fix the classroom size.
Because
Okay.
instead of, you're dividing it by 3 instead of dividing it by 2.
Does that make sense?
Yep,
Okay,
yes,
okay.
I'm tracking.
If we're asking Aisha to prepare information on that for next time, I'd really also like to know what the roles of the aides would be in those classrooms if we were going to go that direction, because I'm just concerned that aides like might be for classroom management and for other things, but like they're not going to, provide reading or other direct instruction. I wouldn't think, I don't know, maybe they do, but I would want to know if that is a viable option, what role they would be filling, because no longer do you have the kindergarten and first and second grade issues where you need students to be escorted someplace and other things. You need someone to really be working, directly with the students in terms of their academics at that age, especially I think, in the 4th and well, even in the 3rd grade, but, and I think, if the needs are around reading or other things, then maybe there's another option, beyond that. So I think like you said, talking to the teams and figuring out what are their concerns about increased class sizes. Is it behavioral? Is it reading? Is it whatever? And then figure out if aides would be addressing that issue or not.
I think also thinking about and I think you may have mentioned this at some point, thinking about the workload level for the teacher in response to class sizes of 28
I mean, the aide's not going to be doing the comments and the grading and the parent conferences and the communication with the
and
parents.
those pieces of things. So these are all things that that I am thinking about, and I think it is worthwhile to look into the particular needs and how the impact for the teacher, as well as how the aid piece.
And I think I'm aware too that it's very hard to hire aides right now. So that might be something that doesn't happen either. So.
Thank you, Co. Final, sure. Go ahead, Paul.
Aisha, would you explain the rationale for holding 2 teachers in reserve rather than assigning them now? We're budgeting 2 in reserve, as I understand it.
So yes, I can explain that. So see how the rationale for holding them in reserve right now is that in terms of addressing this budget shortfall, we decided on what those strategies were going to be using all the criteria that I shared with you the last time I presented in terms of how close could we get to those budget guidelines and there where we needed to stray. How could we apply that consistently? So we applied that standard once we had to get to teaching positions, right? Once we had to get to personnel positions that were in greater numbers, we used the 3 through 5 raising class sizes in the 25 to 28 range in the upper grade. So we applied it consistently across those. Understanding that enrollment does shift and change in very real ways over the course of the summer. From now until August, there will be enrollment shifts and changes. Holding those in reserve rather than making decisions at this time about where those would be allocated seemed to make the most sense to wait and see whether those class sizes that were projected to be at 28 did in fact turn out to be 28, or in fact we see a bubble appear someplace else. So holding them seemed to be the best idea. I can speak from firsthand experience about how shifts have changed, and I could use Ward and Underwood as an example this past year, where we had a class we acted on in the spring on higher class sizes that had reached 28 at Underwood and added a teacher. We ended up with class sizes. We had a move and they ended up with class sizes of 20. It was 27. It was a split. And at the same time, we had a classroom at Ward that was 27, one class. I think it's worthwhile to wait and see some of those. That was the rationale behind that, to see how things panned out.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, so thank you, Aisha. Thank you, Liam. Thank you, Toby.
The third item that we wanted to cover tonight also falls within our FY24 budget review. Specifically, we have a proposal in the form of a memo submitted by member Chris Bresky exploring an alternate funding strategy to close the gap that our district is currently facing. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time tonight to do justice to that conversation. Not after our very lengthy public hearing and executive session and several members, including myself, who've been here since 3, not to mention our staff who've been here since well before 3. So we absolutely cannot truncate this conversation nor shortchange one that will probably elicit a lot of opinion, a lot of questions, a lot of feedback for us to consider. So it wouldn't be fair to put this information out or to take this item up tonight. I think it is a better course for us to pick it up during our next meeting, which is going to be on the 24th after April vacation. Chris, I think this is the fairest course for us to be able to consider the work that you have put forward into the memo that you submitted. And it allows our members to have a full, thorough discussion about the items that you would like us to consider. So with your indulgence, we will take this up during our next meeting. It'll be first up on our next meeting. I think it's that important. We will continue our FY24 budget discussion with this as the first item. And we will work our way diligently towards consensus. After the 24th, we have a meeting on the 27th. The 27th is scheduled to be the meeting that we will take a vote. If we are not ready, we can see what we can do in terms of scheduling an additional meeting for us to be able to vote in a timely fashion. So with that, any questions? Go ahead, Paul, and then Rajiv.
I want to respond. I have a question about something a little different.
Sure. Rajiv, go ahead.
So my question is about the subsequent questions that we're likely to have about the budget. We've, over the last 3 sessions, gone through and heard the recommendations from Kathy and her team. If there are questions we have around how much would something cost, have you considered different approaches? Have you considered different ideas? What's the best way of getting them in a reasonable way to the NPS leadership team?
Well, I'm aware that Kathy and her team, and she can speak in a moment, have done a little bit of, an add back wishful thinking list in preparation for this type of a conversation or a request from the school committee members to see what priorities would be able to prepared to move on. But Kathy, if you could talk a little bit more about that, I think that'd be helpful.
Yeah. So Rajiv, I think I actually heard you say if there were other items you wanted us to look at reducing one versus another.
Exactly. Or as Aisha spoke about a few minutes ago, there were different approaches considered for certain cuts. If in going through the very significant package, I have some ideas about could we potentially do X rather than Y? What's the best way of getting those ideas to you?
What have you done previously? Because we do want to be prepared.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not sure what the process is. I'm open to whatever allows you to make.
That's why I went back to add back priorities, because once Kathy and her team kind of come to us with, these are the things that we would add back in terms of our funding, and Chris has put a proposal for additional ways to raise or alternate funding streams. And so I think both of those come into play in terms of what you're saying, meaning we would need to have some additional funds. We would then need to know what Kathy and her team would encourage us to put those funds into. I think that's
actually not what I'm asking.
Yeah.
But that said, it's late. I can certainly put this in an email, but what I'm What I'm asking is, how do school committee members who have ideas or questions about different approaches, many of which, maybe all of which have already been considered by Kathy's team, send those questions to Kathy and get a response?
Okay.
Can I quickly answer your question? So, what I had in mind when you were talking about was if someone said, I would like to save this program, where else in the budget could we get money that we could free up, not adding funds, right? But just it's like the shell game. It's moving money from one area to another area to fund something else. And so to answer your question, I think it's been at least 12 years, maybe 15 years since that's happened. So it's been a long time.
All right, let's keep this shorter. However, go ahead, Kathy, and then I saw Cove.
So I think the answer to Kathy's question of how we've done this in the past, last year, that we had a Google Doc that went to David, that we could all put questions into, that went to David, and David would decide the best methodology for figuring out how to answer our questions. So I would propose perhaps that, I don't know whether you want a Google Doc or you just want emails from school. That would be.
I'm looking to my team. A Google Doc would make sense that we could.
However, school committee members can't share or contribute jointly to a Google Doc. That's guidance that we have received. So we would be remiss in doing that process. Probably best to send individual emails that you and your team can compile into a Google Doc, but that way we are not jointly creating.
Would you make sure you send it to me and CC Liam? So
Got
they're
it.
much better at getting to their emails a lot quicker.
We
I
will.
get to mine. You see, I stay here at night to try to answer them. So, please include Liam, send it to me directly and CC Liam.
But I think the understanding would be that you don't have to respond in the moment, that you compile them and
right.
then, yeah.
We would start to
Absolutely.
work on.
And I think we collectively need to be respectful in terms of not sending a bunch of questions on April 23rd. Right. So anything we think of over the next few days, maybe the very first couple of days of break is good. After that, there's just less time for responses. But thank you. That the approach of emailing you, Kathy, CCing Liam will work. Thank you.
So,
I just want to know, I just feel like I need to know what the meeting will look like on Monday then, because I think that, I was hoping we would discuss Chris's proposal earlier, because I feel like we'll discuss it on Monday. And then we're going to be in a crunch between Monday and Thursday or Thursday, I guess, to figure out, what the ramifications of his proposal or anything else is. Like, I'm not, it's unfortunate that we didn't get to it Monday or tonight, because now we're going to be piling it together with, I guess the rest of Monday's meeting is to discuss other questions we have about the budget. But I don't know, we would discuss his proposal and then discuss other questions.
yes. In a nutshell, yes.
But I assume that if we wanted to vote for his proposal, then the school team would have to go back and readjust what we would be discussing. And then that would be to the 27th activity. To look at it again, we would need to add something at the end. I mean, that just seems like, to me, you're not going to be able to, if we discuss that and want to vote on that proposal, then we're going to need time in between that to adjust the budget if necessary. If not, then.
So I think that's where I was going when I asked for or suggested that there be some type of add back priority that would kind of fast track some of that work that you're talking about, Cove. Because essentially the proposal that Chris has put forward is to free up funds. And the question then becomes, what do you do with those freed up funds? Where do you, in your judgment, believe that they are best deployed? So that's Rajiv, that's really where I was going the whole time. I mean,
Right.
it's just, for me, that's just, it's
So
just that.
Kathy and her team can have ready where she feels if we had extra funds, it would be.
That would be
in
best
the
in my
moment.
mind. Because as you're right, we will have a very, very short window
Yeah,
of which
versus
to
if we got to
consider.
it this week, we would have at least had a.
Correct. And our straw vote was set for the 24th. Obviously, we're not going to be in a position to, I would highly doubt that we'll be in a position to take up a straw vote on the 24th. And our vote was set for the 26th. 27th. So if need be, we have enough time on Monday to convene or to schedule another meeting. We've been here before, we can do it. But I think it's best to do something like that rather than to have short conversations that mean that you haven't said everything that needs to be said and considered. Cove, anything more?
No.
Go ahead, Rajiv, and then I'm thinking. Mind you, we're almost having 30 minutes just on like how to the process. It's
Well, I know, and I know that's frustrating, but it's.
No, I'm not
it's-
frustrated.
it's
I'm just saying
No,
we
I
are
mean,
long-winded.
you know me, I'm the one who is always past my bedtime at this point. So I'm sympathetic to that and to everyone else. But I just think it's like important for me to understand, to make sure that this proposal, that not only Chris has put a lot of time and energy into, but the community is extremely interested in hearing about.
Absolutely.
And so I want to honor that as well. So.
Thank you.
And just at the beginning, I did mention under the update that we've been working on this a long time. I think at one point I had told you we had color coded, we had, looked at priorities, if there were additional funds. So, we are prepared.
Okay, that's good.
All right, a couple final things on this and then we really do have to.
So
Go ahead.
very
Rajiv.
quickly, thank you for putting Chris's proposal early in the agenda for the 24th. And I want to reiterate something. This is important. If we need to add a meeting, I'm like everyone else, not in favor of unnecessary meetings, but if we are not ready to vote because we're waiting for additional information or analysis, we need to wait till we have it. So if we're in that position, this is important. This is one of the most important things we do, and we'll take care of it. So, and again, thank you, Kathy, for everything you and your team have done over the last, that's been presented over the last 3 or 4 sessions. There's a lot of hard work. We appreciate that. We appreciate the effort, the analysis and the thoughtfulness. So thank you.
Very good point. Thank you for making it, Rajiv. Paul and then Mayor Fuller.
Just 2 thoughts. Sounds like we're going to have a lot to do. And instead of waiting to schedule another meeting, perhaps we could consider having another one early that day in the morning to talk about Chris's proposal and then move on to other things later. Just a thought.
We'll look into it.
And the other question I have is, we now have one set of proposals from one committee member that we have in advance. I'd like to ask that if your permission, Madam Chair, that if others of us have other likely proposals or motions that we're going to make, that we also submit them in advance to other folks so that the discussion could be more fruitful at that point.
I would suggest that you follow the same process that we asked Chris to do, which is to submit your request or proposal or memo or motion to Lisa. Lisa will then distribute it to us and we will consider it during our budget meeting. And I'm assuming it's on the budget, so it's already covered by the agenda.
Yeah.
That's fine. Thank you. We'd appreciate that, actually.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mayor Fuller.
A slightly different version than what Paul was suggesting. I'm wondering if it makes sense for people to tentatively hold the 26th, Wednesday, the 26th, tentatively, rather than earlier in the day on the 24th. I happen to know about lots of things that I'm trying to work on to benefit our kids. So if I could possibly suggest that is for something for the chair to consider.
We can certainly look into it, and Lisa, you'd have to look and see whether
Two negotiations.
on the
scheduled,
26th,
26th,
early?
Custodial negotiations and NTA negotiations back to back. Between.
So Mayor Fuller is suggesting 10. I mean, we did that today, but how's your? No.
All
right, we will find.
I'll just throw out one other, the 25th, unfortunately, there's an Indigo community, a virtual community meeting starting at 6 p.m. and I think that could take a couple of hours. So I know that one's a tough one.
You could just give Chris your proxy.
Hey, right.
So let's do this
To
part.
Indigo or to the school
Let's
committee?
do this part offline.
Okay.
I think it's best. It's complicated to find a time that works for everyone's schedule. All right. So with that, thanks everyone. I think even that little conversation
Tamika,
was fruitful.
You
go ahead.
already acknowledged me, by the way. so,
I apologize. I'm trying to move us along, but I apologize.
I'm very quick. Basically, I want to understand the process here. And I do agree that we need to look at Chris' proposal at earliest possible time, because when we think about our proposal, we have something in my mind. Otherwise, I think could it be wasting our time if prove or not prove? And also a quick question, technical question. Do we have the power to approve Chris' proposal, or the city council has to weigh in? That's just for my knowledge. If we decide
Mayor
to.
Fuller?
This body can approve Chris's proposal. There's some powers still reserved to me that I discussed the other day that still are true tonight as well.
Okay, so sounds like we probably need a little bit more discussion, and I don't know if we need any executive session, but I appreciate if you guys, whatever the communication we need. I just want to make sure, and then we decide when we will look at the Chris proposal and discuss, deliberate, or even, vote on that.
So this discussion wouldn't be ripe for executive session. It would have to happen in the open session, which is what we're contemplating here. But we are going to figure out an additional meeting.
Yeah.
I think that was a wonderful suggestion. Whoever it started, Paul, I think you started that ball rolling. Finding an additional time for us to meet, to have another public meeting just as a placeholder, because we're going to need it, quite frankly.
This is so critical, so I will make my best to be available if you set up any time, because this is so critical. Committees are all looking to us, and I think we should have this obligation to do this work.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Anping. So with that, we've concluded the posted business for tonight's meeting. And as always, thank you to our central staff, and a big thanks to everyone who attended tonight's meeting and commented during the public hearing earlier. We very much appreciate it. Our meeting is adjourned.
Record.